Okay. So I'd like to call the Planning and Transportation Commission meeting to order. It's Wednesday, December 9th. It's a special regular meeting, 6 p.m. I think it's 6:05. Can you please take roll, Robin?
Commissioner Alchek.
Here.
Commissioner Downing.
Here.
Vice Chair Fine.
Here.
Commissioner Gardias.
Present.
Commissioner Rosenblum.
Present.
Chair Tanaka.
Present.
Commissioner Waldvogel.
Here.
All present.
Okay, great. So it's a time in our agenda for any members of the public who wish to speak to an item that's not currently on the agenda to submit a card to hear us at the table. Are there any cards?
None yet.
No. Oh. That would be at the end.
Okay, seeing that there's no cards, I'm going to close the public hearing. And let's move on to, let's see, agenda changes, additions, and deletions. So I'm going to propose that, first of all, after the director's report, we approve the minutes. And then, second of all, because there are several commissioners that need to recuse themselves for 1050 page mill, I'm going to propose that item 2 be moved to the end. And then item 3 is not happening. So it will be just, so the order will be minutes, or director's report minutes, selection of the chair, vice chair, item 4, so 3225 El Camino, and then 1050. So does anyone have issues with that, or everyone good with that? Okay, so that's what it'll be then. So with that, director's report.
Thank you, Chair Tanaka, and good evening, Commissioners. Just wanted to let you know that the City Council considered the planning codes update on Monday and approved the ordinance as submitted by the Planning and Transportation Commission. We're going with a couple of exceptions. The ARB findings are going to get reviewed in probably February, as well as the Tier 2 list and some of the items that you had moved from Tier 1 to Tier 2. So that's going to go in, I believe, February is what we're looking at. And otherwise, that concludes the report.
Okay, great. So minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion?
May I have the
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yes, a question to that. Director Johnson. Question is regard. So in this approval, was the remodeling item included or it's not?
No, that was not included.
That was not included. Okay, but it will be included in the upcoming session.
It's going to be discussed in the upcoming session.
Okay,
and
thank you.
I'll advise the Commission by email when that discussion is going to take place.
Thank you.
Okay, minutes. Anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes? So this is the minutes for October 14th and October 18th. Oh, not 18th, 28th, sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, anyone want to second the motion?
I second.
Okay. Motion made by Commissioner Rosenblum and seconded by Commissioner Gardias. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. All in favor except, all not in favor?
I have to abstain. I wasn't there for the
Okay,
time.
no problem. Okay, motion is approved. The minutes are approved. So let's go on to the selection of chair and vice chair. So, okay, so we have to select the new chair and the new vice chair. And so first, let's do the nomination for the chair. Are there any motions, Commissioner Rosenblum?
I'd like to nominate Vice Chair Fine. I'm not sure this microphone's working, actually.
I don't think it's amplified. I think it's just kind of.
Okay.
Okay, before we begin, so this is just like the last time we had the meeting. That microphone in front of you, the black one, is non-operable at this time. So the silver microphones in front of the commissioners, these are live all the time. Excuse me, all the time. What's in front of staff is just like out in chambers, push the button to talk, turn it off. And then the public microphone is right behind Claire. So bear that in mind because you keep it down, commissioners, please, on the rustling of papers, eating, drinking. So it is picking everything up.
Okay. I would like to nominate current Vice Chair Fine for chair.
Okay. Anyone who would like to second that?
Second.
Okay. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. I think that both yourself and Vice Chair have done a great job in trying to build better process around the PTC. I'd like to see that work continued. I also really appreciated Vice Chair Fine's background and interest in planning more generally and more deeply, and would like to see him continue in that capacity.
Okay, great. You would like to speak to the second?
Sure. So I do agree with everything that Commissioner Rosenbaum said. I will add to that I think that the leadership for this past year in terms of how our meetings have been structured, how they've been organized, the way we've drilled down into issue by issue has been excellent. And I think we have you, the chair, to thank for that. And it couldn't have gone better. You were really an excellent chair. And I hope that Vice Chair Fine continues in that tradition. And I hope that we keep being very thorough and very organized and to the point and always keep finding ways to improve ourselves. And I have full faith that Vice Chair Fine would be an excellent candidate for that.
Okay, great. Does anyone else want to speak on this matter? On the nomination? Any other candidates that want to? Commissioner Curtis?
Yes, I'd like to propose for the chair position my colleague Commissioner Alchek. And I just it has not been discussed with him to prior this nomination or proposal, but it's I hope that he deeply in his heart is going to agree with this. And if you remember, I proposed him for the prior position, and if somebody's going to second, I will appreciate this because I would like to just argue for this proposal. Thank you.
Okay. So we have another nomination on the floor. Anyone want to second the nomination of Commissioner Alchek? Okay, nomination fails. Okay, anyone else want to nominate anyone else or speak on this matter? Okay, I would like to speak on this matter. So I had the privilege of working with the vice chair on a lot, and as a chair, I've actually been extremely busy myself, just on my own, on my other life, and the vice chair has really stepped up to the plate. He's done a lot. I mean, probably more than almost any other vice chair on the commission. So I really appreciate that, and I think that he's going to be natural for this role. He's helped lead a lot of the efforts in terms of process improvements. I think he'll continue that. I think he has a great background, so I have. He has my full support, and I'm actually incredibly grateful that I had him as a vice chair because he did so much of the heavy lifting. So I think he deserves the nomination completely, and I support it. So, okay. With that said, any other comments?
Can I speak to it?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, before you guys all just vote. Yes, so I'm really grateful to my fellow commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Rosenblum, for the nomination. I will accept it. But also, as some others have mentioned, I'm really thankful to you, Chair Tanaka. You really have taken us to another level, and I've learned a lot from your leadership in this commission. To speak to Commissioner Downing's point, I would make it a priority to keep our meetings efficient and on point and work on the substance rather than the process. I think as last week's meeting with council also showed, there's some areas we can improve. I don't believe council wants a rubber stamp committee, planning commission, but there are areas where we can improve and make our feedback more constructive and positive for the business of the city. So thank you all so much.
Okay, well said, and thank you for everyone's comments. So at this point, let's take a vote. So all in favor of the vice chair becoming chair, raise your hand. Okay, it looks like it's unanimous. You have to vote for yourself. Unanimous. Okay, so this is the new vice chair for next year. Awesome. Okay, let's talk about the other one, which is selection of the vice chair. So I'd like to see if anyone would like to make nominations for vice chair. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yes, I would like to nominate Commissioner Gardias for vice chair.
Okay. Does anyone want to second the motion for Commissioner Gardias?
No, I'm happy to second you. Why don't you second?
I'll be happy to second that.
Okay. So do you want to speak on the motion?
Sure. I think Commissioner Gardias has been a very interesting source of information on this commission. He's managed to find issues and look at details in ways that many of us have not been able to. He often brings up things that none of us have thought about, and I think that's incredibly valuable for us. And I think that it would be helpful if a lot of those issues, could be brought, before in pre-commission meetings, and we get, a little bit more exploration, a little more depth in them before they come to general meetings. And so I think it would, if Commissioner Gardias were interested in being vice chair, I think it would really help to enrich our sessions that we have during PTC. I think he would be an excellent addition, and I think that I have a lot of faith in his leadership.
Okay, great. Do you want to speak to
No,
a second?
it's
Oh, go ahead.
Sure. I'll check.
Oh, sorry. I'll check. Sorry. Commissioner.
I think, I won't repeat what you said. I think one of the most appealing qualities of Commissioner Gardias is his sort of empathy for the process. And he brings a very level-headed and calm and collected approach to his comments. And I find that he makes a sincere effort to approach these complex issues that we deal with in a sensitive way. And I think that particularly in this time, that makes sense. I think our approach should be should include that sort of sensitivity and that sort of maturity, and so I'm excited about him.
Great. Does anyone else want to speak to the? Oh, one. Right.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was also unexpected, but I am very grateful for this nomination. I will accept it. Thank you.
Okay. And do you want to say anything else, or?
No.
Okay. Does anyone else want to speak to the nomination? Does anyone else have any other nominations for vice chair? Okay. So I think let's take a vote then. Okay. All in favor? Raise your hand. You don't vote for yourself?
Can I go?
Okay. Unanimous. Okay, great. So we have a new chair and vice chair for next year. Yeah.
Well, it should have been
Thank you guys for stepping up to the challenge here. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to, let's close this item and let's move on to 3225. Does staff have a report?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So
Oh,
the
sorry.
project.
Wait, hold on.
So I will actually recuse myself from this particular item.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
I live quite close to
Oh, I
this
didn't know that.
particular
Okay. Oh, I
So
see.
I'm going to step out,
Okay.
and please come and get me when you're ready for your
Yep,
next
yep.
item.
Didn't know that. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's good.
She doesn't have to be completely out of earshot.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a quasi-judicial issue, so maybe before the staff report begins, we'll just do kind of a quick roundtable here to see if anyone has talked to the applicant, and so we should disclose that, or visit the sites, or anything that needs to be disclosed. It's a good time to say something. Anyone?
I mean, I've visited the site many times in terms of living in Palo Alto.
Okay. Anyone else? I driven past it too, but I don't think that counts.
Nobody bought tennis shoes. Everybody bought tennis shoes.
Okay, so I think there's nothing disclosed. Okay, please, Steph.
Okay, thank you. So the project before you tonight is for site and design for a new mixed-use building. Currently, the site is developed with a commercial building, the Foot Locker site.
Is there a way to actually?
This is not amplified.
It's not yet.
No, it's just.
My mic wasn't on either.
Oh, I don't think it's even amplified, is it?
No, I'm just recording.
So we just gotta talk loud. I'm just gonna talk a little bit loud today.
Because you turned around that way.
Yeah.
It's a little hard.
Is it possible maybe it'd be easier if you sat on this side and spoke this way? We would all be able to hear you in the
Oh, can we
front
Or on
amplify
the
it?
end.
No, can we turn this?
End is fine.
Okay, forget it. Just talk loud.
Okay, I will do that. So we have a mixed-use project here for 3225 El Camino Real. The site is currently developed with a retail building. It's 7,000 square feet, and it's surrounded by a surface parking lot. The site right now currently doesn't have any vegetation or any other amenities on the site. The proposed project has an approximate 12,000 square foot area of commercial, and it includes 8 residential units. 4 of those will be rental units, and 4 of those will be condominium units. the project has two separate buildings. There's a two-story building. The lower building is a 100% commercial building where it would have retail on the ground floor, office use above. And the second four-story building would have ground floor retail, and the residential units would be located above that. The project provides both surface and below-grade parking for a total of 73 spaces. The project also includes a shared parking adjustment request for 3%, which is equivalent to 2 spaces, to provide 73 spaces instead of 75 spaces. And it also includes a design enhancement exception request for 4%, for a 4% reduction to the El Camino Real Build 2 line. And we'll get into details about that a little bit later. And also, this project is subject to the recently adopted interim ordinance that establishes a 50,000 square foot annual limit on office and R&D. And of course, the applicant wants to complete all of the planning requirements by the associated March 31st, 2016 deadline. So that's the goal. The site and design review process is required for all projects that have more than 4 dwelling units. And this review process starts with the Planning Commission and then goes to the Architectural Review Board and then goes to City Council for final action. The recommendations, of course, will be forwarded to Council for consideration. There are 4 site and design review findings that need to be made for the project. The first is to ensure construction and operation of the use in a manner that will be orderly, harmonious, and compatible with existing or potential uses of adjoining or nearby sites. The second, to ensure the desirability of investment or the conduct of business, research, or educational activities, or other authorized occupations in the same or adjacent areas. The third is to ensure that sound principles of environmental design and ecology and ecological balance shall be observed. And lastly, to ensure that the use will be in accord with the Palo Alto Comprehensive Plan. In attachment B of the staff report, the record of land use action, page 2 provides detailed responses to all of these findings for your consideration. So for this particular project, we did an initial study and a mitigated negative declaration. The 30-day public review began on December 4th, so we're in the comment period right now, and that will end on January 8th, 2016. We added a few extra days to the comment period just because of the holidays. The identified potential impacts are associated with the protection of nesting birds and the development on contaminated soils. And they're basically 2 mitigations, and those have been included in the conditions of approval for the project as well. So there are 3 issues for this project: the parking adjustment request, the design enhancement exception, and the consistency with the South El Camino Real design guidelines. For the parking reduction, based upon the project's joint use, the planning director can approve a parking adjustment for the shared parking facility for up to 20%. A 3% reduction is being requested to allow 73 spaces for the project instead of 75. And the applicant did provide a parking analysis, and staff did review that very carefully, and staff does support this requested reduction. So the second is the design enhancement exception, and the DE is not actually within the PTC's purview, but it's definitely here for you. I want to let you know about the details of this design enhancement exception. So the CS development standards require a 50% build-to line along El Camino Real, and that would mean that 74.9 feet of the building mass is required to be placed at the build-to line along El Camino. And the project is proposing a 46% build-to line, which is a 4.9 foot reduction to the mass. And staff supports the DEE because the central plaza is a key feature of this project, and shifting the buildings inward would make the plaza less desirable, both functionally and aesthetically. So the project is generally consistent with the South El Camino Real design guidelines, but there are 2 elements of the project that could be developed a little bit further to make the project more complying, and that has to do with just the landscaping for the project and the details on the corner building. So the project will be reviewed by the ARB, and they will take a closer look at those elements of the project. So the next steps for the project, we're going to complete the the public comment period for the MND, and then we're going to go to the ARB tentatively scheduled for the end of January, and then also back to City Council for hopefully final review at the end of February. So in conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning and Transportation Commission recommend that the City Council approve the record of land use action, approving the site and design review to allow the construction of a mixed-use project at 3225 El Camino Real. Thank you.
Okay, great. So does the applicant have a presentation?
Yes, we just need to hook him up.
Okay.
So we have yes.
You want to share?
Yeah,
Yeah,
would that be okay?
That's fine. Yeah, sure. I have nothing right now.
Oh. I like the new venue. Visual? Cozy.
I'm going to slide around.
So how much time did you need?
I'm
How
sorry?
much time did you need?
Just about 10 minutes,
That's okay?
maybe 11.
That's fine.
Depends how fast I go.
Okay, that should be good.
Let's see. That's once I get, don't start the clock yet. That's once I have set it.
Gotta clean that dust up.
I was hoping you wouldn't see that. So this is on, I take it? Lights on? Okay. Good evening, Chair Tanaka, members of the Commission. My name is Ken Hayes with Hayes Group Architects. I'll be presenting the project on behalf of my client, Deanza Properties. I am joined tonight by project consultants. We have the Gazzardo Partnership here, they're the landscape architects. We have Hexagon Transportation Consultants here if you have questions regarding the parking reduction. And we have TDM specialist here that prepared the TDM plan, and they're called TDM specialists. The site is a 30,000 square foot approximately site on the corner of Portage and El Camino. It's the current site of the Foot Locker. One of the unique things about the site is that there is a, oh, I can't point, Hanson Way terminates basically on an axis to the site, and so we've taken advantage of that in our proposal. The site is surrounded by primarily CS zone properties. Some street views, I think we're probably all familiar with the Foot Locker, but this is looking from El Camino south, from El Camino north, and then this is down Portage, looking at the side of the building. The program for the project is to create a new 4-story mixed-use commercial building with 4 two-bedroom apartments. They're about 1,350 square feet, and 4 four-bedroom townhouse-style condos, and they're about just over 2,100 square feet. We want to respond to the nature of the site, park the project primarily in the subterranean garage, provide enjoyable living and working spaces that enhance the pedestrian experience, and reinforces the edges, I think, along El Camino and Portage, and support sustainable systems. So we've been at this for a couple years, actually, and so 2 years ago, in October 2013, we had a preliminary ARB hearing, and the project kind of went on a hiatus. And then last week, we had an ARB, sort of an informal reintroduction to the project. They were generally supportive of the original site plan, which you see here. It's a 2-building concept, large building on the corner, smaller building inward. We were trying to create a plaza between the buildings, some kind of a public space happening there. We wanted to put the parking, trash, and utilities behind the buildings, screened from El Camino and away from Portage. The comments that they had at that time were, we really need to think that you need to strengthen this idea of a plaza concept, and we agree. Make the smaller building more prominent, perhaps by moving it forward and actually getting rid of this Hanson Way, where Hanson Way is written, getting rid of that El Camino Real driveway, We had a couple access points on Portage Avenue. Those have all been reduced to one, and you'll see the revised site plan. They thought that we should increase the ground floor parking because there is a large retail component that will be going back in, and then revise the vehicular circulation like I just described. And then last week they talked about really enhancing the landscaping, really make the plaza a special place, and they had some minor comments on some architectural elements. So this is the site plan we're proposing. We're reinforcing the corner with the main building. It's a 4-story building. We have the second building. We've moved it forward. We've moved it south on the property. It starts to sort of define the edge of the project. We have a terminus for Hanson Way, which will be this outdoor courtyard space that actually is wider at the front than it necks down. It connects the parking to the building entries. There's the plaza. This is a building that you can circulate all around. Lots of connectivity to pass through the site, around the site, and all the time seeing lots of storefront windows. It's a bus stop right there in front, so there'll be some synergy, I think, with the plaza and the bus stop. And then these are building entry points, so we're entering on the corner of the corner building, the two corners, as well as off of the plaza and off of the rear area of the building. Then the smaller building has multiple entries as well. And then the one ingress and egress, as I said, off of Portage, and we've moved the access to the parking garage sort of in this sort of hidden corner or edge of the site where that big fat arrow is, and that's the access in and out of the underground garage. A little bit larger scale, I just kind of want to walk you through the plans of the building. The courtyard has the main building entrances sort of both off of that courtyard to reinforce the courtyard. So an elevator feeds the garage below and the building above. As well as a stairwell at that location. We have seating opportunities in the plaza. Going up through the building, the residential units are actually planned around an outside, open-to-the-air courtyard that I don't like the idea of being in a double-loaded corridor going to a living unit. So this is open, so you have fresh air that can circulate through. There'll be furniture, that sort of thing out in that space. All the entries feed off of that courtyard into the 4 units at this level. On the perimeters are their outdoor balconies, and they can look from those balconies in 2 directions from each balcony. And the office portion of the project is located in the smaller building to the south, but connected with an exterior bridge that adds some excitement, I think, in the courtyard space and some 3-dimensional quality to it. This is the level of the condo townhomes, which is the 3rd level. And you see the courtyard again in the center, allowing for access, cross ventilation through the units. And you see the roof of the canopy, which is covered with a building integrated photovoltaic panel system to provide weather protection, and we use that panel system later on as well. This is the 2nd floor of the townhouses, and so they're planned around a 2-story open space, living room, dining room, kitchen, and that's the big white area with the X in it in each of the 3 units. And then you have a study and a couple bedrooms at this level. There were a couple bedrooms at the level below this as well. At the roof level, we have the top of the skylight, or the courtyard is capped by a photovoltaic panel that provides protection in that courtyard and also helps generate some power, primarily to provide lighting for the underground garage. And that's a glass PV panel system, so it's a laminated product. It lets sunlight in, you can see through it, and we thought that would be a really interesting feature to cap that space. Excuse me. The building elevation on the top is what we showed the ARB 2 years ago. The proposal is on the lower. And so you see we've taken the building on the right, the lower building, pushed it further to the right to define that edge with a building form element. The 2 buildings now talk the same language with a strong geometric form. We actually reduced the height of the 4-story building and stepped the 4th floor back as opposed to what you see in the building elevation above. And that was for a number of reasons, and one was to respond to the building just to the north that I just learned at the ARB hearing. I guess is not going to continue at this point, so we'll be the first. You can see the people on the balconies, so they have balconies on that 2nd and 3rd floor for the residential units. Ground floor is all primarily glass for the retail. The portage elevation before and the proposed at the bottom. You can see that we've developed it a little bit more detail, and you can see how the materials interrelate with one another, and it's a nice symmetrical composition. Again, ground floor, some landscaping, and retail window glass, and the entrance there goes into a stair element that takes you up into down to the garage or up into the upper floors. The area below the angled roof is open to the sky or to the air. And then this is in the courtyard itself. So the bridge comes across, that's the big black rectangle as it comes across the space. And the idea is to have sort of a similar element on the other building to create some tension visually, I think, between the two pieces. The streetscape, so the building on the left apparently is not, at least at this time, moving forward. But you can see how our building related to that and anchors the corner, yet it steps down to the building that is just to the south of us, which is also a small mixed-use building. And we've always felt like we should provide a transition there up to the corner. And it's reinforced, I think, by providing this void outdoor courtyard between, and you can see the bridge that connects the two. This is the portage elevation, and I guess the building on the far left has recently been remodeled and lifted up, so it's a two-story building now. But I imagine that this composition will be like this for years to come. Obviously, we're not showing all the trees in these elevations. We want you to see what's behind the trees, okay? But there is a ribbon of trees. Three-story, or this is the three-dimensional view that we use for the design. It shows the courtyard, shows how the buildings relate to one another. You see the photovoltaic panel up on top of the building there, and the various balconies. And then some more refined images of the building from the south, looking north on El Camino, and from north looking south along El Camino. And I believe that's the presentation. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. If any members of the public wish to speak on this project, you should submit a public speaking card. I don't know where the cards are, but if you want one, good. Do we have any?
No, not for this item.
Okay. So I'll call this the public hearing to close then, and bring it back to the commission. So here's how I think we should do this meeting. So I think we should just start with some Q&A that you guys might have for either staff or the applicant, and then as you guys ask some questions, I'll note down the issues that I hear, and then we can talk through the issues and try to resolve them. Okay. So let's start off with questions. Does anyone on the commission have questions? Commissioner Rosenblum.
Yeah, just a couple of clarifying questions for staff. So the purview of the PTC is around ensuring construction operation of the use and manner that will be orderly, harmonious, compatible with adjoining or nearby sites, to ensure the desirability of investment or conduct of business in the same or adjacent areas, to ensure that sound principles of environmental design, ecological balance are observed, to ensure the use will be accorded with the Palo Alto Comprehensive Plan. The one that I want the most guidance on is the first, which is how did you make the determination of being harmonious and compatible with the existing or adjoining sites? I can see this being quite compatible with the El Camino vision, but it is quite different from the adjoining sites, which, as you showed, are commercial, and so by nature they're different. So I'm just curious how you make that finding, or how we are to think about that finding.
So in the record of land use, we do have the staff discussion for this particular finding. And I do think we're looking at the big picture of how things are moving towards for the future development of El Camino. And we're definitely using the guidelines provided in the design guidelines and the ARB findings to help us with this finding.
So is it primarily adherence to the El Camino design standard plan for the future, less around what currently exists in the directly adjacent properties? Is that correct?
I think that is how the staff has phrased the finding or responded to the finding.
So, yeah, I mean, I think we, when we look at this, we're looking at a number of policy documents, the comprehensive plan, the El Camino guidelines, and of course the zoning code. And I think that, you know, you're right. I mean, it is different. It is a taller, as I'm looking at the streetscape, it is a taller building relative to sort of what's taking place on the corners. It looks like mostly 1- and 2-story buildings. You know, I would say that the adjacent building, the adjacent property, or adjoining property is a 2-story, and I think that the applicant has done a decent job transitioning from the smaller building to the adjoining property. There is no adjoining property at the corner, and I think that there is that opportunity for that additional, or to allow for the height that's being contemplated. I'd also note that the area itself is, you know, quasi-industrial too, as you go further down Portage, and you know, I guess part of the answering of the question is the inverse as well, and would it be would it detract from the harmony or compatibility of the area? And I think it's in our analysis is also the inverse that we're contemplating as well.
Got it.
And Cara was just pointing out to me about the existing or potential uses. And when you look at the potential uses, you can actually see on the screen before you a project that actually did not go forward, but that is a potential development project that could take place. And so in that regard, it's right in line with what's permitted in the, or contemplated in the area.
Thank you. That was my question. And I just have one more question, which I think I understand, but just for clarification, that the plan director had allowable 20% reduction for sites that had shared parking for multiple uses. In this case, they're asking for 3% reduction. Your analysis is based on the parking impact based on mixed use, and they've come it's something like 8 spaces above what the study had showed. Is that essentially correct? That there was some latitude up to 20%. They've only asked for 3%. However, based on the project mixed use analysis, it could be lower.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. We don't have lights here, so you guys are going to have to catch my eye. So, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you for that, Lawrence. In looking at the compatibility in nearby sites, did you also consider the potential RM30 redevelopment on the Fry's site? Because this corner, if and when that site is redeveloped, will turn into a gateway to that to a larger residential site.
So for the future development, I mean, we all understand that it is zoned for RM30, but currently there are no plans for redevelopment of the Fry site, so we're not really we're not using that direction to define what's happening here with this particular project. Certainly when the Fry site is redeveloped at that time, you know, maybe there'll be additional considerations for how Portage will be treated, but for this project, it's not.
Okay, so the answer is no.
Okay. The answer is no.
Thank you.
Well, but I guess I would challenge a little bit the conclusion that this would be a gateway for that. I don't necessarily regard this intersection at Portage and El Camino as a gateway. Certainly it would be an access point to the residential area, but I don't know that anything about the building itself would be in conflict with a future residential development that is several blocks away from.
No, it just wasn't studied though.
Well, I guess wasn't studied, or was there a need to study it? I mean, there's a lot of things we didn't study, but because we didn't feel like it was, needed.
Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first question is to our attorney, Cara Silver. So it's about design exemption and the comment that Clara had in her slides that this is not within our purview. We talked about this last year, so I know that this is not within our purview. But because we actually had the build to line, I just cannot reconcile logically this comment with our with our work on the build to line. If this is purview of this commission to regulate build to line, and we are not, and it is not within our purview to make a comment or reflect on the design exemption, it's just something is logically not compatible here. If you could just comment on this, please. Thank you.
Sure. So the build to line issue that came to you last year was a legislative action. It was a zoning code change. And so you as the Planning Commission passed recommendations on to the council with respect to zoning code amendments. So that's the purview that you had on that particular issue. I will say that the council did look at that issue, raise some additional issues, and there has not been a final change to the build to line standard. We're still studying that issue, and it will come back later, and it might even come back to this commission as well. So right now we are operating under the old requirements. The current requirements do have this build to line, and then with respect to the variance requirement that is needed from the build to line, the zoning code sets that up as a planning director decision, and so that's just something that the planning director decides as opposed to the planning commission. So that's why you don't have purview over the particular application of the build to line to this project.
So just two comments. One, Cara used the term variance, but I want to make a distinction that it's variance in the context of deviation from the code as opposed to the formal variance application, which is subject to a different set of findings. But also note that the PTC did forward a recommendation on the build to line ordinance, and that build to line recommendation did include, as I recall, introduction of more flexibility in how that build to line standard is applied on El Camino Real. So it is in the spirit of that relaxing of the standard that also we considered when evaluating the DEE, but also the courtyard design as well was part of that.
Okay, and so if I may just continue on this, right? So, but regardless, let me ask you a quick question to Clara. Is so the current facade of the building or the ground floor is along the 12 feet setback, right? Is it?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And then there is a protrusion of the upper floor balconies. What's the protrusion?
Let me check that for you just to make sure. But it's definitely there's certain, in the CS zone, there are certain provisions allowed for certain projections, such as the balcony, and the balcony does comply with that allowable projection. Let me just check that for you.
Looks like it's about 2.5 feet.
Ken is saying it's roughly 2.5 feet.
It's still behind the property line.
Okay, so in the zoning table, it does say that the balcony is 3 feet 6, projecting past the 12-foot sidewalk width.
Okay, so we have 2.5 feet projection from the windows to the ground retail, right? Or is it deeper?
No.
Go ahead. Do you want to clarify?
Wish I had a plan. Go for it.
Go on your left, there's a closest.
Yeah, and I won't have a microphone.
Like you just tell me.
Yeah,
Yeah, just spin. We're good. Ken Hayes. So, to answer your question, this facade here is on the build-to line, and these balconies here project about, I think, 2.5 feet out. This is pushed back about a foot to 18 inches here to allow for this planter. This main element, though, is essentially on the build-to line.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So this was about the build-to line. So this is pretty much, we're just doing this along the old zoning code. So there's one thing that I would like to raise, right, which is which, as Kara argued, it may not be within our purview, right? But then it is within the purview of this commission to do the planning for El Camino, and then also we discussed initiative of Grand Boulevard of El Camino. So when I just think about this, and also this is in relationship to the variance that is being proposed of the 4.9 feet, nearly 2 meters, right? That I think that with the whole respect, you have it backward, because when I think about El Camino and when I think about the Portage Road, I would say that the main facade, the main emphasis point, and should be along El Camino. And for this reason, I would like to welcome rather a broader facade or wider facade along El Camino, and not request for a reduction, but maybe a reduction on the other side, which is not as important from the perspective of El Camino. And then, if it's not in our purview, it is not. But then I hope that this discussion will continue on the ARB and in front of the City Council, because this is important. And from this perspective, I would, if I was part of ERB, I would not recommend this exemption of additional 4.5 feet, because it just goes against the initiative of Grand Boulevard. Yes,
So-
is this
I would love
argument?
to, may I just offer a
Sure.
comment? So when we read the South, when we read the South El Camino Real guidelines, if you turn to drawing A0.4, we have what we believe is the definition of the build to line. And basically it says buildings should be built, this is verbatim out of the South El Camino Real guidelines. And we understand, building on the street. However, there should be opportunity for relief. And as you read this, it says, should be built up to the setback line continuously, except for articulations such as doorways, recessed window bays, small plazas, driveways, small parking areas to the sides of buildings, and where the facade is set back from the build-to line, low walls and hedges are encouraged to maintain the continuity of the streetscape. So because we felt so strongly about trying to create linkages throughout the community, and in particular this project with Hanson, the energy from Hanson Way terminating somewhere, we wanted to create this outdoor space here. But we have brought out this 3.5-foot tall planter over here that's about 14 feet long that is on the build-to line. So we thought we were in compliance. When you add up the width of this and the width of this, reinforcing that street edge, we're like 10 feet more than we need for build-to line. So there's a difference of opinion, I guess, between how this definition is interpreted.
Right. No, I understand. But then, planter, it's not has that much of the spatial value as the facade of the building. So it's the main artery of Palo Alto and Peninsula is El Camino. So if this was somebody else's project, if I just showed you those two elevations, probably you would select the other one that's along Portage as the more representative and more adequate for El Camino, as opposed to the other one. And then, rightfully, when I look at this west elevation that you have on the screen at this moment, right, this looks to me as a side elevation, not as a front elevation. So from the public space interest, I think that the other elevation around Portage should be along El Camino, and this one should be along Portage.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rosenblum?
Yeah, just to, in the interest of trying to keep the commission on point. So to Commissioner Gardias' point that this is unusual, that's outside our purview, I don't think it's unusual that our purview was to think about a ordinance that affects all buildings, but is not about a specific building, which is within the ARB's purview. So I don't find that inconsistent, and I'm sure that is actually what it is. Second, even if it were, the thing that we're supposed to look at, the design exception says for minor exceptions of a certain type. And so from 74.8, I think, to 70 plus, they have this additional planter element. I think even if it were our purview, this fulfills the criteria required for design exceptions. But for the purpose of trying to keep the commission on track, I understand why this is outside our purview. It makes sense to me that we were on the ordinance but not on every individual review.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Vice Chair.
So just one quick question to the applicant, and then another bigger issue. Is placing the underground garage access to the rest of the parking lot ideal for this project? Or would you prefer the first plan that you had where the access to the underground garage was separate? I'm just wondering your preference.
I actually prefer this direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. And then this is kind of the larger issue I wanted to get at, and it's still about this frontage. I think it's kind of interesting on both the frontage and the parking. We're dealing with these issues like 3 or 4%. It seems like on the issue of parking, there's some discretion of the director. I was hoping staff could explain, how we can compare this to essentially the 4%. How can we compare that to the El Camino design guidelines, which are clearly 50%, which this doesn't meet. And it's kind of building on Commissioner Rosenblum's point here, like how much flexibility do we have? Because it's clearly not in compliance with the El Camino design guidelines. Do we have the ability to? Yeah, the bill too, as specified in the El Camino design guidelines. What flexibility do we have? I mean, any?
So let me take a stab at that, and perhaps Mr. Lake can chime in as well. So I think that in terms of your overall purview, if you think that this build-to-line issue on El Camino is significant enough to affect the site and design findings, which are, contextual and compatibility related, you might be able to address it through those findings. If you don't think that there's any overlap and it's just a pure, build-to-line DEE issue, then, I don't think you have purview over that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. A couple of questions. First of all, I want to say thanks for the presentation. It's actually a very strong application. And, I do have a couple of questions. One of them is for staff, which is, you mentioned 7,000 feet. I think you initially said 7,000 feet of retail. The drawings show retail and commercial. There's kind of an awkward way that the buildings are split, 6,500, 2,500. There's currently 7,000 feet of retail. So what is the actual plan of record here in terms of creating a retail relationship, an ongoing retail relationship between the building facade, and El Camino Real?
Okay, so the existing condition with the Foot Locker site is the 7,000 square feet of retail.
Mhm.
The proposed project will be replacing that same, actually more square footage than the 7,000 square feet, and it is split between the 2 ground floor spaces. We've got the net numbers are presented in the staff report. So is your question about how would the spaces relate to each other?
Well, the question is, if my understanding is correct, the larger building has 6,500 square feet available, which is less than 7,000. So, yet the drawings that were projected showed that as retail, and the other one as commercial. The other 2,500 is commercial. So, what is are we preserving 7,000 of retail, or are we preserving 7,000 as non-office, or what uses are we projecting here?
So we're definitely, at this moment, we're preserving the minimum of 7,000 square feet of retail, and it is split between the 2 ground floor spaces. There are some notes in the plans that basically specify what that square footage has to be, but we do have these areas. So the first floor on the fourth floor, four-story building is 6,500, like you mentioned. The second-story building, there's 2,000 square feet. So these two spaces will be consolidated or split between two businesses, but those spaces will remain as a retail service.
So there's no intent, say, to do 6,500 and then 500 of retail and the other 1,500 or 2,000 as some other use?
I don't think we know exactly. I mean, the requirement would be right now to at least maintain that 7,000 square feet because that's the existing condition.
But can we add a requirement that the 7,000 or that the El Camino side of this maintains a retail relationship? And what would be awkward would be to have some other use in the smaller building in the front, which then blocks it off, closes it off, and sort of shuts down that half block of El Camino.
Well, I think the uses would be, they are governed by the allowable uses in our code section, and that ground floor space can actually be used for other things other than retail. Office is not a use that would go on the ground floor. That's not a permitted ground floor use. So we would maybe see, I have to look at the list, but there are definitely other types of commercial uses that could go on the ground floor that are not retail.
So what discretion do we have to try to keep that El Camino side?
So if I can offer, so
Penny?
One, you might want to ask the applicant what their intent is about that, but two, coming back to the finding that Commissioner Rosenblum had mentioned first, dealing with compatibility and harmonious with existing and potential uses in the adjoining or nearby sites. If you're seeing retail replicated along El Camino, and it's your interest to ensure that a retail presence or retail-like, or a gym or something like that is the type of use that you'd like to see in El Camino. I don't think it would be that far of a stretch to have a condition imposed if that was a concern of the commission.
No. Does anybody else?
So just a question to my fellow commissioner. You're asking about the disposition of retail as it is along the street wall, right?
Yes.
The ground floor retail. For the ground floor retail preservation, it's just the quantity, actually, isn't it? It's not necessarily the distribution or arrangement.
Yeah, that's correct. There are two different ground floor retail preservation ordinances in play here. This particular project is a pipeline project, and so it's not subject to the recent council-passed retail preservation, but there is an existing retail preservation requirement in the zoning code. So they're slightly different.
Okay. Are there other questions?
Was there an answer to that? Would the applicant like to speak?
I'd be happy to. Actually, John, I have some more technical information.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Do you want me to,
But we could put a condition.
do you want me to address it?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, I believe the rule is, I think they can hear.
No, you're recording it.
For the recording. I believe the rule is you have to replace the existing retail.
That's correct.
So 7,000, they told us we have to replace 7,000. I can't see how, I lease space all the time, you never know what could happen, but I cannot see how the ground floor, you could cut it any way where it wouldn't be all retail. I just don't see. So if you
I'm sorry,
feel,
could you repeat that again?
I don't see how you could lease it up, cut it up in a way where it wasn't all retail.
Okay.
It'd be very difficult to take, unless some cube of that building somewhere had some other, I just don't know. Maybe it'd be.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to get the intent. Sort of the best notion we have today, on the record, because downtown we have all kinds of problems with just shut it up the sides.
And just to point out, we have used the more restrictive parking requirements, this is Ken Hayes, for establishing the number of spaces needed. We've assumed that ground floor would be or could be retail. If we assumed it was another use, there could be fewer parking, but we've taken a more restrictive approach.
Can I ask my more difficult question?
Please.
So this is in the CS, Service Commercial District, and the CS district, I'll just quote a little bit, is for services that may be inappropriate in neighborhood or pedestrian-oriented shopping areas, which generally require automotive access for customer convenience. So that's the purpose definition of the CS district. CS is not a pedestrian district, it's more of an auto-oriented district, so we have a little bit of conflict here in the guidance, and in the various applicable plans. But given that, and given that we have to go to war with the code we have and not the code we want, I think, I'd like to say to at least to the ARB, a heads up, that I'm not sure this building is very legible in terms of serving this auto-oriented use. And I think that better legibility around that might make sense. I know, again, there's conflicts between El Camino guidelines and existing CS code, but I do have some concerns that CS is an auto-oriented district. And so how do we represent that here better?
So I think staff should answer that question. The zoning code in CS, it goes so far as to recommend an RM30, housing density on those projects. So they're not just encouraging auto use. I think they're encouraging a mixture of uses that would be appropriate for an El Camino, and most of those CS zones occur along El Camino.
Yeah,
right?
it's not, but this isn't about the mixed use. This is really, does the ground floor relationship really give you the sense that you should turn in there and park your car? That
I see what you're saying.
That there's a business there that is something that you would want to access
Drive
from
up
your
to.
car. Yeah, drive up to.
Oh,
because I'm just not sure that's as legible from this as one might like. There are a lot of things to support here, but I'm just raising that as a.
So we originally had that driveway off of El Camino, and the ARB, and I actually agree with their determination or recommendation.
I don't think
at that
driveway
point.
is the fix. This is better.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. But that would allow cars to more readily access the site. And then there is parking on grade, and they encouraged us to increase the amount of parking on grade. But yeah, we're not thinking any kind of auto use.
Yeah, because I would just really I would strongly oppose any kind of shared parking facility in this CS district. I think in a CN district, that does have a pedestrian orientation, absolutely, but in a CS district, I'm really uncomfortable.
So I'd like to get some thoughts also from my fellow commissioners about the parking issue, the shared parking issue.
Okay, I have that down as an issue, so we'll talk about
We're still
that.
talking about that in Bill 2, you think?
Well, I was trying to collect the issues that we have, so I have a pretty long list of issues. But before we dive into
Let's
that
go
one,
through that then, maybe.
okay. Before we do that, I actually have a few questions myself. Does anyone else have questions? No. Okay. So, I guess from the applicant, can you talk a little bit about why you guys had a separate building versus having one building?
Oh, yeah. So we felt, again, that there's some issues on the site, right, in terms of how you use the site, where the parking makes sense, where it doesn't make sense, where you create building entry. So when you put parking at the back of a site, especially with retail, most of your visitors, if they are arriving by car, are going to park in that lot behind the site, all right? So now you're faced with, well, how do you get them to where you want the main entrance to be, which is ideally, I think, facing El Camino Real, and that's what the El Camino Real guidelines encourage you to do. Entry should face El Camino. Yet you're putting your majority of your parking, behind the building because, like the El Camino Real guidelines suggest, screen it from view. And so by separating the buildings apart and creating a kind of common entry core between the buildings, we felt like that solved that issue. People could come in, the courtyard acts as a big entry statement from El Camino, and then it provides connectivity to the parking lot behind. Two other issues or concerns were the energy from Hanson Way, trying to create linkages throughout the community, which I hear all the time and we try to promote. So that responds to a specific site force, in my opinion. So separating those buildings reinforces that visual connectivity. And then lastly, the way to transition and scale down to an otherwise smaller scale streetscape.
Okay, great. Thank you. That makes sense. And then I guess this is maybe a question for staff. So El Camino is a really, really busy street, and Portage also is a pretty busy street. So those are, one of the most intense traffic areas. And it's good that I think the residential's on the second floor, but, or maybe this is a question for the maybe more a question for the applicant, but has there been thought about, especially because residential kind of doesn't like a lot of traffic, right? Like office, retail is actually good. Has there been thoughts about trying to have more of the office towards the busier streets and residential away from the busier streets? Because I think right now you have the office kind of on the inside and the residential on the Portage side. Is that right?
Yeah, we have
on the busiest corner of Portage and El Camino. You have that's the most intense amount of traffic.
Right.
But that's on the second floor. You have residential, but then on the second building 2, you have office, which actually probably would appreciate more traffic. And so why did you put the residential against the heavy traffic area?
Well, we knew that was going to be the larger building, right? We want to contain all of the units in one building. It also allows that building to have light and air from more than just, let's say, 2 sides. I mean, essentially, by locating it where this office building has no openings that face the property line, all right, to the south. So that was one consideration. And knowing that it was going to be the larger building, it made sense to place it on that corner. We have had a analysis by acoustical engineer, and they've made recommendations for complying with the CBC in terms of what indoor noise standards are, and we're fully compliant. And I'm not even sure if Rincon, the CEQA consultant, is here. That's not even one of the mitigations. So I think we're fine from that standpoint. We've set the units back. So if you look at the El Camino, we're back about 8 to 10 feet
Slash office.
From the El Camino frontage.
But I mean, I could also see why not just take the second story of your second building, which is office right now, and put that in the front of your big building that's facing El Camino Portage, because that's the most intense most intense intersection, right? And the office will probably appreciate it, and residential, you're trying to get that away from heavy traffic. So I don't.
Yeah, we were comfortable with the decisions that we made on how we zoned the site. Yeah.
Okay, so let me go over kind of a list of issues that I've heard, and you guys sound off whether these are issues that we should discuss or whether we're okay on them. So I think Commissioner Rosenblum brought off the point about height. I don't know if that's an issue for you at all. I asked a question, but I'm not sure that's an issue. Otherwise, we'll skip it.
About height?
Yeah.
The compliance with funding one, right?
Yeah.
Oh, about the kid. No, I just
Okay.
wanted to get clarification.
Okay.
I got clarification.
Okay, we'll skip
Thank
that
you.
one. Okay, and then Commissioner Waffle, you talked about the far side consequence. I'm not sure there's a tangible issue that we want to discuss, but is there something in more depth that you want to talk about or a proposal you had? At this point, I'm just trying to do an inventory of the issues. So
Right. Well, is that or is that not a proper?
well, this is something up to you,
piece
right? So
of-
if you think that's something that the commission should deliberate on, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, we'll skip it.
Well, let's see if anybody else
Okay,
shares that concern.
so we'll keep it on the agenda here. And then this is one that staff brought up, although I think Commissioner Rosenbaum and maybe a few others wanted to talk about, including Vice Chair, which is the parking adjustment request. Okay, so we'll keep that on the agenda. And then this is one that staff's brought up, but also I think Commissioner Garnias talked about, which is the design enhancement exception. So I assume you still want to talk about that and proposals around that?
Well, it's really hard if it's not in our purview, right? But I
Okay.
think that
Well, it's actually all listed on staff's issue for us to discuss and deliberate. Right, so if you look at the list of issues that staff asked us, key issues that staff has asked us to address, it's the second item, right? So we should probably discuss it.
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. And then, let's see, Vice Chair brought up the issue about the garage entrance. I'm not sure if okay, so we're gonna skip that. Okay, and then, let's see, I think Commissioner Wolfoger brought up the issue about whether this should come in conflict with the CS zone about more building on auto use. I'm not sure if you really want to talk about that or whether we should skip it.
We should just see if there's any other.
Okay,
shares
so we'll keep that on
concern.
there. And then, let's see, the last one is one I brought up, which is whether the most intense traffic area should be facing residential or should be facing office. So that's one I'd like to bring up. So those are the list of issues. So let's go through each of them one by one. Let's start off with the one that Commissioner Wolfogel brought up, which is we all know that this is part of the CalAV concept plan, although that plan's still being has not yet been approved officially. There's Fry's, we all know, is closing down. So Commissioner Wolfogel, do you want to help frame up the issue or proposal that you have around this topic, like specifically for this project that you want us to deliberate?
Well, I think this is more of a negative argument that it seems like this should have been part of the staff analysis.
Okay.
Because it's hard for me to agree or disagree with whether the project is consistent with the goal of ensuring desirability of investment, ... in the same adjacent areas, when I know that redevelopment is pending.
Okay.
And yet I have no idea what, I honestly, I'm looking for some guidance here on how to approach this question.
Okay.
With no information.
Okay. So, Commissioner.
Through the chair,
Sure.
just to clarify, so my understanding is that there's no pending application. So that's why staff doesn't really have any basis to analyze. I mean, they could come forward with a application for 4 single-family homes. We just don't know at this point.
Right, but that's not what this guideline says.
Yeah. So I think Commissioner Wolfogel has a proposal for us to consider on the table, which is that the Fry site consequence should be something that we should deliberate. Staff has said nothing's on the table. We all know that. Concept plan hasn't been approved yet either. So this is all kind of speculative, but do commissioners want to okay? I guess Commissioner Wolfogel, why don't you?
Just want to confirm that the format is that for items we want to discuss, this is the time to hash it out.
Yes.
One by one, and we're on
Yes.
this item now.
Yes,
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
We're on this. Should we ask
Yeah.
staff to consider the potential Fry site redevelopment?
Yeah. So
Right.
I'll make a statement, then ask if my fellow commissioner agrees. I think it's the same thing I asked, which is how did you find compatibility when this area is zoned commercial and the buildings adjacent, including Fry's, by the way, that is not directly adjacent, will be redeveloped in the future potentially. And the answer was that this is aligned with both concept plans and future development plans for the surrounding area. And I would agree that Fry's seems somewhat speculative, but given that it could be denser housing, I wouldn't find that incompatible. But the direct areas around, I found that their answer that what they considered were directly adjacent directional plans seems satisfactory. This does seem aligned with buildings that could be built around it, which is our responsibility. That is the standard we're trying to measure this against.
Okay, so this makes so we can have a clear process. So I think what we're trying to do on each of these items is the person that proposed will make a proposal, which is staff should analyze the eventual consequence of Fry's redevelopment. And if folks disagree, I think you should raise your hand, say something. So I think Commissioner Rosenblum said basically he's okay with the way it is now.
Yes.
Okay. Agrees with staff's current direction. Okay. Does anyone else disagree with Commissioner Wolfogel's statement? Okay, Vice Chair.
So I kind of disagree with the specific suggestion to focus on Fry's as a topic of investigation for this application. Although I did have some issues with the finding, and I know that's in the code, the finding that we have to make, but it's a hard bar to me. It's pretty vague. Consistent with the goal of ensuring the desirability of investments. I'm not really sure what that means. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how that applies in this area. That's a little harder and faster. So in this case, I don't believe we need to look at Fry's, but this is a somewhat troublesome finding for me.
Okay. Commissioner.
Okay, so I don't feel like I need to rehash some of the comments my fellow commissioner says. I don't think that we need to ask staff to review this. I think I would agree with their assessment that review was not necessary.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so, anyone else disagrees with the proposal that staff reviews Fry's as part of this? Okay, so I also disagree. So I think I'm not going to repeat the reasons why because I think everyone's already said that. So that means we have 4 commissioners that think that staff is okay in terms of trying to consider fries, and probably 2 that think that we should consider fries. Okay, let's move to the next item. Parking adjustment request. So this is one that staff has explicitly asked us to consider as the first bullet on page 8 that we're supposed to deliberate. I think Commissioner Rosenblum, you actually asked some questions around this. I'm not sure if you have a specific proposal, but if you do, if you could make it, and then the rest of us could say whether we agree or disagree.
Yeah, so they've included a table of the potential parking impact. And that's in, I believe, page 56 of 141 in the full package, shared parking analysis. Staff has contended that they reviewed this in detail, found it accurate. I agree that in general, the beauty of mixed use is that you have different intensity of uses during different times of the day, and therefore can use parking more efficiently. And that is actually one of the benefits of mixed use, and that's why we want to encourage mixed use. So I also found this, the fact that they're looking for a 3% reduction when there's discretion up to 20%, and the capacity size gets up to a maximum of 67% based on their analysis. It felt to me that there is adequate buffer and the scope of reduction given the director's discretion is far less. So I think staff has done their job here.
Okay, so the proposal is agreement with staff. Does anyone disagree with staff on their finding for this key issue that we're supposed to deliberate? We should raise your hand and talk about it. Anyone disagree? Okay, Commissioner Wolfenko, please.
So let me find the quote. Maybe there's a question only to clarification, but.
And maybe can I add something while you're looking for that?
Yeah.
In addition to the parking reduction, the applicant will be putting together a TDM program for the site too, so that will further enhance the reduction of parking and the need for parking and trips to the site as well. Oh yes, and their consultant is here if you have questions about that. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thought I had this tabbed properly.
No problem. It's a big packet.
It is a big packet. Okay, now finding the page. I just want to paraphrase. I think that there was some commentary that employee parking permits would be limited in some fashion.
That's in the TDM plan.
But do we have any performance guarantees that will ensure no impacts on the Ventura neighborhood? I mean, that employees won't just drift off-site and park in Ventura?
Why would they? We have plenty of parking on site.
Well, it depends on the use. I mean, you could imagine uses. You could imagine, or say, a restaurant use. I mean, I don't know if that's an intended use, but you could imagine a restaurant use that would, that would undermine that.
We're not planning for a restaurant, but maybe a coffee shop or sandwich shop, something like that. I can imagine.
I mean, you can imagine a gym use that might undermine it for some times of the day. So.
And I could just clarify that. For the project is the way it's being proposed is for the office use and for retail. If any other commercial use was proposed, we would need to go through the use and occupancy review to make sure that the existing conditions would support that. And we do look at the parking requirements. So if it was a more intense use like a restaurant, we would say, no, you can't do that because you don't have the parking, or then we need to sit down and evaluate what can you do on the site to add parking to it.
Yeah, and the other one you could imagine is if some of these 4 bedrooms were to turn into Airbnbs, you could also see that undermining the parking. That would generate more demand for parking. So, I mean, there's scenarios you could see where this would not work.
Okay. Does anyone else disagree with staff's recommendation on this issue that you would like to discuss, talk about? Vice Chair?
I don't disagree with it, but I just want to put it out there for the record. The reason for this is because it's shared use, and I think there are 5 shared spots between the businesses and the freight, and that's the reason it qualifies for this. Just something we haven't discussed yet.
Okay. So it looks like everyone, except for one, agrees with staff's recommendation on this. So let's move on to, which is actually the second issue that staff asked us to talk about on key issues, page 8, which is the design enhancements exception. So I think Commissioner Gardas, you asked some questions around this. Do you have a specific proposal around this issue?
So let me ask you, staff, what was the reason, if this was not in our purview, what was the reason of putting this bullet point on this slide?
Well, I'm sorry, I just wanted to have full disclosure and tell you all of the components of the project, and so that way you just understand all of the nuances that are being proposed for the project.
Okay. Because, unfortunately, it's, as Ms. Silver stated, right, it's not in our purview, but for the record, and I know that some council members, they read our meeting minutes, so I think it's important, and they take it seriously. So I just want to reiterate that, I think that the side facade along Portage should be along El Camino. And for this reason, I hope that this discussion is going to continue this way at the ARB and at the council meeting, because from the Grand Boulevard perspective, that's the design is not as it's supposed to be. And then if this design exemption further neglects the scale of El Camino that we would like to have. And then in addition, you may have a couple of other arguments, like for example, that you may say that part of the retail will be at a disadvantage because it would be on the other side, would not be visible from El Camino, so it's pretty much losing its appeal. And I'm one of those persons that drive along El Camino, and I just, if I may, sometimes I look around at the signs and at the windows, and I know that, okay, here I would like to stop, right? And that's the appealing part of the commerce to me. If there is something on the other side, it's not going to be appealing if you're going to just put the signage on the front elevation that there is something on the other side, right? So the risk is also that retail that we would like to preserve and enhance as part of our commerce in the city, it's losing its appeal, and potentially it may be degraded, right? The front maybe side would be leased out, the other side may be very much staying empty, right? Which is also a risk for the investor, right? For the record. Right? So, thank you.
So, is there a specific recommendation to have the kind of frontage they have on Portage on El Camino? Is that your specific recommendation?
Well, I don't know. Yeah,
if I can just also clarify, your comments today will be forwarded to the ARB. So, if you do have some concerns, those comments will be passed to them for their consideration in the review of the DE.
Yes, I think that this is pretty much fair, right? Because if I don't have if we don't have a mandate to vote on this from the perspective of the design enhancement, then pretty much we won't, right? But then if the comments would be forwarded to ARB, I think this is the fair thing to do.
Okay. So for folks that disagree with Commissioner Gardias's proposal, which is that there should be more frontage on El Camino than Portage, say something. So Commissioner Alto.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of sort of designing from the dais. I understood what you just said about how our comments are going to be forwarded to the ARB for their consideration, and I don't know if I take issue with this idea that there could be some personal it's a very personal opinion whether or not the facade or look of this building sort of is preferred by one person or another, and then it's sort of a different rationale if the argument is, or if the statement is, that there is a conflict here from a design perspective with the principles espoused by the
guidelines.
The guidelines, and I for sure do not feel like there is an issue with the design here and with respect to the guidelines. And from that perspective, I don't know that the ARB should take anything away so far from our discussion with respect to the frontage. I mean, I think there's a place and time for design review, and where the design conflicts with sort of broader guidelines, I think it's relevant for us, but I'm a little, I think it's just very personal, depending on the eyes, who's looking at it. And so I'm much more comfortable with the ARB doing their review with that, with knowing that, and I'd let my other commissioners chime in here, that I disagree with that general instruction to change the frontage. I just disagree with that. And then I want to suggest that I think that if we're not discussing this in sort of the context of the general guidelines, then we are veering into that sort of site design review, which I think is a mistake for so many reasons. Because there is an art to this, and while anybody and any resident really can have an opinion about this, we empower a certain group of technical experts to sort of review that. I'll also just say, while I have the floor, that I am comfortable supporting a motion making all 4 of these findings. I think I feel very comfortable that that all 4 of these findings have been met, and I find it's an exciting opportunity. Actually, it's not just that I find this to be harmonious and compatible. I think that this project will instill a renewed vigor in what I consider to be sort of a sad little area. We were, at one point tonight, we had commissioners talking about the Fry site, which could be decades away. We could create a conceptual plan for that area, and we could have all sorts of ideas, but the owner has to be motivated to hire an architect to spend time on that. And I think I think that's sort of a distraction to be overly concerned with that with any potential conflicts there. Particularly because I don't think, number one, that there is a conflict, but also because that's so far removed from today. So, in the interest of time, I'd like to sort of move through the rest of the issues a little more quickly, because I think that and if anybody else disagrees, please chime in. But I think we have a lot of agreement here based on these findings, and I'd like to sort of see us tie it up.
Anyone else? Commissioner Rosenbaum.
Yeah, I would agree that I also could support that we have met the findings on this particular issue. I appreciate Commissioner Gardias also often, his background as an architect, often sees things that I would not. But I do find, again, in addition to this being outside our purview, the definition, and this is the one of the things I took away from our joint session with council is Mayor Holman said, really look to find the ordinance that you're basing your findings on. So Code Section 18.76.050. The purpose of DE is to permit a minor exception to zoning regulations. When doing so, enhance the design of a proposed project without altering the function or use of the site or its impact surrounding properties. So you're talking about 4.9 feet of 74.9 feet of building mass, and this was under recommendation to make a better plaza. So I think this is actually the textbook definition of a DE, even if this were our purview, and it's not. So I would say I'm also in agreement. If one were to propose a motion or go through the other items, I'd be in support that we've met findings.
Okay. Anyone else that disagrees with Commissioner Gardias' proposal, Vice Chair?
So I also agree with my fellow commissioners that we could move forward with the current findings. As I agree with Commissioner Rosenblum as well. This probably is an ARB thing for them to deal with. They get to design from the dais. My one, I don't know if it's a concern exactly, but I find it interesting that finding 4 is the use will be in accord with the Palo comprehensive plan. What about other relevant plans? It seems like either this issue shouldn't have been brought to us, or we should be evaluating it with relation to the South El Camino design guidelines.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm also going to say that I also disagree with. I think it is fine with the DE for the various reasons that the other commissioners mentioned. So we have 4 that are in favor of the staff's recommendation. So let's go on to the next one.
Well, just me.
Sure.
Just for the record, right? I totally agree with my colleagues that that the issue is closed, right? There is, because of these reasons, there will be no way just to propose any motion on this, right? But just for the record, because also others will be reading the minutes, as we already stated. Sure. There is if you read the South El Camino Real Design Guidelines, section 3.13, which is on that sheet that we discussed, A0.4, buildings should be built up to the sidewalk to reinforce the definition and importance of the street. So with the decreased width of the facade, pretty much it's just the design goes along against this definition. And then also for the record, right, because the retail is more valuable and brings more income along the major streets. For this reason, merchants are wealthier where they have ability just to set up their stores along that street. So for this reason, the retail along El Camino would be always more valuable than on the side of the building. Yeah. And those are pretty much economic arguments to support this. But as I stated, right, sure, there's no way for us to propose any motion. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in general, I also agree that more frontage on El Camino is good, but in this case, I think that plaza makes a lot of sense. So, okay, good. So we'll close on that item. Next item, it was actually Commissioner Wolfogels brought this up, and actually I think staff talked about it, so maybe something that staff actually agrees with it as well, which was that, and I think even the applicant was saying that it's not be very likely that the first floor building 2 would be not retail. So I think, I know, Commissioner Wolfogel, do you have a proposal that you'd like us to consider around that item?
Well, I will point that sheet A2.1 designates that building. It's the floor plan, level 1, does designate that building as retail/office. So,
do you have a specific proposal? Like staff said that they could put that into.
Well, is there? I'm not sure that I can construct the language in real time. But is there a way for us to, and perhaps this feeds back into Commissioner Gardias' point, but is there a way for us to ensure that the El Camino facade does present a retail front? Do we have a tool for that?
Was that it, or was it that the first floor be retail for a second building?
Well, look, it's fine if there's 7,000. I'm fine if there's 7,000 feet of retail, and if El Camino is retail. I mean, those are the two things that I care about.
Consent to that?
Yeah, he already applicants.
Yeah.
I think all
so
in agreement.
I think
so I don't know if.
Yeah.
Does staff have a recommendation as to how
the use have to? Can I ask a clarifying question real quick? Sure. Didn't we already get clarification that if the use were to change, it would have to go through a secondary review? If there was anything other than a retail use, it would have to be reviewed again?
On the second building? I don't know if that's true. Is that true?
So anytime there's a change of use, they have to go through a use and occupancy process where we do evaluate the land uses.
But it doesn't mean it has to be retail. It could start as office.
Right, but what you're suggesting is that you have some lack of faith that review process won't continue to further our goals. So the assumption here is, should we make some sort of permanence here? I think that would be a mistake. It's got to be.
Hold on, before you debate that, let's finish off. Let's let Commissioner Wolfogel brought up topic. I think staff can make a recommendation as to how we could construct it, and then let's debate it before we.
No, I think there's a broader question here: is do we even need to discuss this?
Well,
because if in fact there is a process already in place for whether they would change their use.
Let's answer that.
All right.
If I may, just is the concern that the windows might be, boarded up somehow? There might be draperies pulled. Is that the main concern?
I mean, it would be logically consistent for the retail in this building to be on the plaza side. I mean, it's a logical possibility. I'm not saying it's a commercially sensible choice, but the question is, will this El Camino side reinforce the El Camino Boulevard concept?
I'm just wondering if we added a condition that those windows be kept, clear and open to the El Camino frontage, would that help your concern.
Is that the right way to do it, or?
Isn't your concern that the retail fill up El Camino backwards? That El
Yes.
Camino, and I would consent to that. Am I allowed to consent to condition?
Yeah.
If they make it a condition.
Well, I mean,
Well, just what do we have to do?
Okay, guys, let's staff comment on this.
So, yeah, I mean, if the commission agrees that there's a concern that needs to be regulated, then you certainly could direct us to prepare a condition. We don't have to craft it right now. We just need to get the essence of it. So if there's that interest.
And it doesn't have to be laid out as a permanent condition. If that's just the initial condition, then any change from that would require subsequent review, and we would be fine.
I think that's what's already in place.
I don't think so, because this shows retail/office in that.
I think because the space is less than, because when you add up the numbers, it is less than 7,000. They're merely just pointing out that this, at least part of this to get to the 7,000 will be retail. And that's what the suggestion is, because maybe there might be a little nook in the back that could be part of the office that's upstairs, something like that. But it certainly meets the requirements.
So, Commissioner Walford, you brought this up. So, what do we want to do here?
Well, I think that we heard a proposal that the retail fill from the El Camino side back.
Okay.
Is there just some way to craft that?
Yeah,
that is
so we would recommend a condition along those lines if that's the commission's interest.
Okay.
We can memorialize that.
Okay. So, anyone that disagrees with that recommendation, why don't you say something? Does anyone disagree with that? Okay, Commissioner Alto.
Yeah, this is, I guess, process-oriented disagreement. I just think this is a little bit redundant. I think it's unnecessary. Your applicant not only agrees with that approach, but I also think that I just think it's unnecessary. And
Okay, that's fine.
my preference here is to be efficient and concise, and I don't think we're doing that. I think we're just creating work.
Okay. Anyone else that disagrees? Commissioner Rosenbaum.
Yeah, basically the same. I just don't know enough about how one fills retail. I don't feel like we should create conditions. It feels logical to me what's already been stated, that given the requirement for retail, that you'd have this odd little nook if you didn't devote the second building to be retail. So I have a fair degree of confidence, given the layout, that's unlikely to be split into offices facing El Camino. But I also just don't know. I don't feel like adding arbitrary conditions. I don't know what the consequences of those will be longer term. That doesn't feel right to me. It also does certainly add work.
Okay. Is there anyone else that disagrees with Commissioner Rofogo's/staff's? Say something if you want. Vice Chair. Yes. Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So I think we have three that disagree, and I guess that's three that agree. So it's kind of a tie. Okay. So other one is this is yours, Commissioner Wolfengo, which is around the El Camino design guidelines, having this more auto use centric versus pedestrian centric. Yes, district. Yeah. Do you have a specific proposal around this one that you wish to?
Well, I guess the question for staff is, how do they arrive at the finding that this is a CS compatible? I mean, how did you arrive at the finding that this use is compatible with the CS district purpose?
So I'll take that. There's a couple of references in the general plan, the comprehensive plan, that describes service commercial. You certainly identified a few of them. I'll just read in the housing element, we describe the service commercial as a land use designation that supports citywide regional commercial facilities for people arriving by automobile and allows mixed use development with housing and ground floor retail. Policy L9 enhance the desirability characteristics in mixed use areas, use the planning and zoning process to create opportunities for new mixed use development. It talks about the Cal Avenue Ventura area have established a pattern of mixed use with service commercial, light industrial housing in both areas. Continuing the mix of land uses is encouraged. This is again L9. And then the definition of, or the designation that you've already identified for service commercial goes on to talk about types of auto-serving dealerships. In almost all these cases, they require good automobile and service access so that customers can safely load and unload. So that here the idea is to have a site design that allows for vehicles to get off the main thoroughfare and onto the property. It notes that in some locations, residential and mixed-use projects may be appropriate in this land use category. Examples of service commercial areas include this corridor and other areas. So, we and there may very well be other references to service commercial and mixed use and housing, and so that it's not a fast food restaurant or some other auto-oriented type of use, I don't think makes it inconsistent or incompliant with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, before you go, do you have a specific proposal that you have around this? That you want us to consider or deliberate?
No, I think that I'm satisfied with the staff explanation. I
Okay.
just wanted to get that on the record.
Okay, that's fine. So basically, does anyone disagree with staff's recommendation? If so, say something. Okay, so we're good on this item. So last one is mine. So this is one I brought up earlier, which is that, right now, this project has the most intense amount of auto traffic is actually on the corner of Portage and El Camino. It's by far the busiest part of the whole project. And while it's great that retail's on the first floor, the second floor is residential, and residential in general is not very compatible to lots and lots of traffic, which is what will happen here. And yet the part that is office, which would be probably more compatible to intense amount of traffic, is on the second building. And so my specific proposal is that we swap it, that the intense amount of traffic on the facing the Portage El Camino corner, that residential be moved to the second building and swapped so that you don't have residents. And I agree that there's a lot of soundproofing you could do, but it's not the most compatible use by putting residential against traffic, especially if you have outdoor space, balconies, etc. So that's my specific proposal. So I'd like to actually hear from my fellow commissioners. If you guys disagree with me, say something. Vice Chair.
So I disagree with that. I'm most convinced by the findings in the environmental impact report that the mitigations are sufficient to address that. I'm also wondering, maybe staff can answer this, do we know if most intense traffic is all in that turn of Portage? Because I'm wondering if it's actually right where Hanson hits El Camino. There's sometimes a backup there, actually. And I'm just wondering if staff knows about the traffic intensities right at this intersection.
We have Raphael from our transportation.
Raphael's next.
And we also have the consultant who can speak to that, right?
Raphael Reyes, transportation project engineer, and I did review the traffic study. I don't remember the numbers exactly off the top of my head, but I was just updated by the consultant that did the study that Hanson has more traffic than Portage. I could see that likely during the typical weekdays and maybe Fry's on the weekends or something. But
right. So it's people coming from Hanson hitting El Camino and going left.
Going left or right.
But wait a second, Hanson doesn't go through this project. Hanson's on the other side of the street.
Yeah, I mean, but approaching El Camino and then turning onto El Camino versus the number of cars approaching from Portage turning onto El Camino.
Or El Camino going to Portage.
Yeah,
I think that's probably...
But I think the issue, though, is if it's going by building 2, it's certainly going to go by building 1. So, I mean, but that might be true. But, I mean, my argument is you have traffic on El Camino plus Portage. A corner is going to have more traffic than any single street. There's no way around it. It's the nature of physics, right?
Acceleration.
So.
Acceleration is from the signal. It's not from...
Actually, wait to be called, please. Okay, so anyways.
So just on a final point, I mean, I think it meets the environmental standards we have set forth. So I'm okay with it, but I do agree with you in principle.
Okay, that's fair.
I disagree. I mean, I appreciate the point, but I think that I'm not sure that it's materially. I'm not sure that the traffic noise is materially different in these two conditions, and I think this design seems to me to be better resolved.
Okay. Anyone else disagree? Commissioner Alto.
Yeah, I share Commissioner Waldfogel's opinion. Okay. I think also, if you look I know that we haven't fully integrated the Grand Boulevard Initiative, but the underlying principles for the Grand Boulevard Initiative are essentially transit-oriented development. And I think it's dangerous to sort of approach residential in transit-oriented areas with this sort of suburban preference for, or I shouldn't say preference, suburban lens, which is that there's sort of an inappropriate interaction between private outdoor space and then the sort of bustle of a community. I think actually that's exactly the objective of transit-oriented development, which is to bring our residents right into where they're doing the most activity, which will in theory minimize the amount of traffic, but also create a different sort of environment and a different sort of community. Look, I think it's unfortunate we couldn't fit more residential in this space, to be perfectly honest, because we could really use more residential, and I don't think that. And I'll add just another caveat, which is I don't think that lens, that approach I think we should be careful not to allow that lens conflict with the sort of data, which we should never let that cloud the data. The data has to sort of inform us, and so in this particular case, I think we're going to be okay, and that's all I'll say about that.
Okay. Anyone else disagree? Commissioner Rosenbaum.
I agree with Commissioner Waldvogel. I think that finding the current plan meets requirement.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can I just strongly agree with what Commissioner Alchek said about more housing?
Yes,
that's fine.
Plus
fine.
a dozen.
But not something that we can act
Okay.
on.
Okay. So I think the tally is 4 disagree with me. Maybe one other agrees with me. So I think the commission's spoken that the plan's fine as it is in terms of this issue. Although I would just leave it with one item, which is that I understand what Commissioner Alchek's saying that in the urban lens, maybe residential, it's good. Residential is very, very compatible to high amounts of traffic. But I think here in Palo Alto, I think you might have residents calling for traffic calming or traffic circles or something crazy like that. So I hear what you're saying, but this is not San Francisco. So I think in general, keeping residential away from traffic is generally a good rule. But anyways, we heard the commission, so that's it. So let me read the tally here. So the tally is essentially the commission says no, we don't need to consider a price side consequence. I think so. We have 4 commissioners say that's fine. In terms of the parking adjustment request, I think all but one commissioner agreed with staff's request or recommendation. In regards to the design enhancement exception, I think 4 agreed with staff's request, so majority. In regards to 7,000, or I guess in regards to maintaining the El Camino use on El Camino, in terms of having some sort of provision that retail must be on the second part, I think it was 3-3, so tied, or I guess fell because not majority. In regards to consistency with having auto use, I think everyone agrees with staff's recommendation. And in regards to keeping residential away from high amounts of traffic, I think the commission 4 says that no, that's okay. So that's the summary. So does anyone want to make a motion at this point?
I'll make a motion.
Vice Chair.
I'll make a motion that we recommend that the City Council approve the record of land use action, attachment B, approving the site design review to allow construction of this mixed-use project at 3225 El Camino.
Second.
Second, okay. Do you want to?
Sure. So I think we've hashed out some good issues tonight. and I think most of them we couldn't reach a specific agreement on, but we've surfaced them, which is really important. The one I will call out is the DEE. Seems to be a little troublesome to some of this commission, but obviously it's not our purview.
Okay.
I think we've done a really good job actually tonight in discussing a lot of the issues, and I'm proud of that work. I will add that I think the work product of this particular firm has impressed me on a number of occasions, and I am excited to see this project go through its process. I'm sure there will be changes along the way. That seems inevitable, but I think you've got a really great start, and I think I'm hopeful that we will actually speak in unison tonight about this motion, particularly in light of our good discussion.
Okay. Does anyone want to deliberate this motion before we take a vote?
Just one clarification. So I just want to make sure that the reference to support the record of land use action is the one that was placed at places this today before the commission. That was the one that included some additional conditions related to the public works. Yes, that's the one, as opposed to the one that was in the staff report.
Yes. So then the motion recommends that the council approve the record of land use action as that places tonight, not in the attachment.
Okay.
Just one question related to that. Did anything get included in this about construction conditions? Any additional construction conditions? We talked about this.
Yeah, I think we have on the, I think when we looked at it, it was in the mitigation monitoring, and try to take a look and see where that is here.
For the Public Works Division, they always require, there's a logistics plan that's required, and there's an encroachment permit that's required. So when staff reviews that, we also look at how it impacts the sidewalks and closure of sidewalks and things like that. So that's
There have been some public complaints that I've heard of, about construction traffic intruding, construction traffic from Cal Ave intruding onto the neighborhoods, construction parking, etc. So it'd be nice if we could mitigate that.
Do you have a friendly amendment you would like to make, or an amendment in general?
Well, is there anything?
Yeah. So condition 59 is a logistics plan, and I'll just read it to the commission. Tell me to stop whenever you want me to stop. The contractor must submit a logistics plan to the Public Works Department prior to commencing work that addresses all impacts to the city's right-of-way, including but not limited to pedestrian control, traffic control, truck routes, material deliveries, contractors parking, concrete pours, crane lifts, work hours, noise control, dust control, stormwater pollution prevention, contractors contact, noticing of affected businesses, and schedule of work. So this is a standard condition that we impose on projects go through a review process. So if you think that covers the issue, then it's in there. If you don't think it does, then that's...
Devil's in the details, but that's good.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, guys. Any other questions, comments, deliberation before we vote? Okay, guys. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, we are unanimous. Okay, so we'll call this item closed, and let's get... I have to recuse myself. I think Vice Chair.
I think we need to state for the record why we...
Sure.
I'll
go. Well, actually, Commissioner Rosenbaum,
It's
which
very
go
well
first?
done. So don't take any of the questions.
So I'm recused from this item. My wife is an employee of Stanford, and therefore have an interest in this project.
I'm recused from this item because my father's partner used to work for Stanford, and to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest, I'm recusing myself.
And my house is too close to this project, so I'm going to recuse myself as well. Thank you. So we're going to call this this part to an end, and then we'll start the next item in maybe 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. Before I open the public hearing for this item, I want to invite staff to comment on a few things.
Sure, and I'll start us off, and then Carl will have a few comments to make. But just to sort of remind ourselves where we left off, we actually did open the public hearing on this item at our last meeting, and heard public testimony. After the public testimony, the public hearing was closed. We adjourned that meeting so that we can vet out some potential conflict issues, which Carl will speak to in a moment. We adjourn here today as a continuation of that meeting. We have since received a letter, I believe from Stanford, which was transmitted to the commission, and we have a couple of requests to speak. It is the chair's discretion to decide to open the public hearing again and receive those comments. Given the limited nature of speakers, this is a small group, staff would recommend deferring to an open and inclusive conversation. So we'd recommend that you have that open that public hearing again. And with that, Cara, do you have any other thoughts?
Thank you. Cara Silver, Senior Assistant City Attorney. Since this issue was adjourned in order to get some feedback from the Fair Political Practices Commission on some potential conflicts, I did want to provide a summary of the advice that we did receive from the FPPC. We submitted a letter to the FPPC, and we received back some what they call interpretive guidance. This is not formal guidance, so but it certainly is an indication of how they would analyze the issues if we were to submit a formal request for an opinion. We asked about 4 issues with an optional 5th one that's not relevant here, but with respect to the first question, what we asked was whether when they look at conflict situations, do they look at the entire parcel, which is approximately 600 acres here, or do they focus on just the leasehold parcel and the particular project that is subject to the decision? And the feedback that we got from the FPPC was that the conflict analysis would focus just on the leasehold parcel with respect to this particular project. Then we asked about Commissioner Downing's leasehold interest in the property, and it was determined that leasehold interests are analyzed differently than real property interests. With real property interests, under the new rules, if you're located within 500 feet of the subject property, you cannot participate in a decision unless the FPPC provides a written letter authorizing participation. That's not the case with a leasehold interest, though. Also, with respect to Commissioner Downing, since her leasehold interest is outside of the 500 feet, because we look at the leasehold parcel, not the entire parcel, and because when you analyze the factors for a leasehold interest, we do not believe, and the FPPC did not raise a question about any of those triggers being applicable. And so we have determined in discussions with Ms. Downing that she can participate in this item under the regulations. With respect to Mr. Rosenblum, the FPPC agreed with the interpretation that because his spouse is a employee of the university, that he should not participate. And then with respect to Commissioner Fine, the FPPC provided guidance that they did not believe that his particular situation did warrant a legal conflict of interest. And that is because He does not have a real property interest or a leasehold interest in the property where he resides. And the and so so there is not a legal conflict of interest. He, however, has decided, just in abundance of caution and appearance of impropriety, not to participate in this particular item. However, with the 4 commissioners that we have present, we do have a quorum, so we can now proceed with the matter. Thank you.
And then just to remind, if you choose to open the public hearing, I'd recommend that you offer that opportunity first to the applicant. Last time, the applicant declined to make a presentation. It's what's before the commission today is the environmental impact report. That's all we're looking at, and looking for your recommendation to council. And then, should the applicant decline to speak, if there's any rebuttal comments after the public comment period, or from the comments, it'd be appropriate to give that opportunity.
Would you remind us the typical order? We would reopen the public hearing and allow public comment, and then the applicant would have their presentation, or would the applicant begin the public hearing comment period?
Yeah, the applicant would begin the public comment period if you choose to open that up.
And typically we provide them...
in this case, I think it's 15 minutes.
And their rebuttal?
3. Would be 3.
Okay. Okay. Well, before I reopen the public hearing and do all of that, I just want to acknowledge the incredibly thorough approach that our staff, and particularly our legal staff, took to this recusal issue. I honestly, this, as a real estate land use attorney, this is we should be sending an email to the bar asking them to add this to their list of questions that they use for the annual bar exam. It's a good one. But no, really, there's no question that our legal team is second to no city in this state. So I appreciate that, really.
State.
My legal experience is specific to the state of California, so I can't really speak outside our. Okay, I'd like to reopen the public hearing to give individuals in the community an opportunity to speak, also to give the applicant an opportunity to present. Does the applicant have an interest in making it? Okay, you have 15 minutes.
Okay. Acting Chair Alchek and Commissioners, thank you for your time again tonight. I'm going to try to make my comments concise for you. Our project is a proposed replacement project taking down 265,000 square feet of obsolete buildings and replacing them with the same floor area of LEED platinum buildings that are designed in a way to create a really wonderful, we think, campus-like environment. They're in 4 buildings, and we've actually put over 50% of the parking on these buildings underground in order to create a really great green space that actually is about the size of 2 football fields. We do have PVs going across all 4 buildings, the rooftops of all 4 buildings, and we have a lot of other great LEED features, including EV charging stations. We have over 32 EV charging stations, which exceeds the LEED requirements. I want to talk about a couple of the high-level issues. Tonight's main focus will be on the EIR. Historically, replacement projects such as this have actually been only subject to a negative declaration or a mitigated neg deck. But in our instance, staff was concerned about the traffic impacts, in particular because we had worked with the neighborhoods, College Terrace, to address their #1 issue, which was traffic onto California Avenue. And in this instance, we voluntarily worked to close off access from our property onto California Avenue, so to have all of the traffic flow on and off of Page Mill Road. And because of that, I think in that traffic implication, we went through an EIR with a focus on the traffic impacts. And even with relating to our EIR as well, I'd like to point out that our EIR analysis actually looks at a more conservative project than this. It looks at a bigger project at 285,000 square feet, and our proposed project is actually only at 265,000 square feet. And even with a higher, more conservative analysis, city consultants and the EIR consultants have concluded that this project does not result in any significant impact, both either traffic nor any other CEQA-related impacts. Relating to our project, the existing projects were compliant buildings that were built in phases between 1961 and 1980. These projects were legally permitted and went through all the approval process at the time. We actually did some research, and we believe that according to city records, there weren't actually FAR requirements in the research park prior to 1979. So again, it should not be a doubt that these buildings were in compliance prior to that. So as a result, there is a particular section in the Palo Alto zoning code that protects and allows for replacement square footage like this project does. Building Code 1870-100C specifically allows for the replacement of commercial buildings with commercial buildings of the same floor area as long as these buildings were compliant or were existing prior to August 1 of 1989. Our project is explicitly, following this code. It was in existence, and it follows all other site development standards that are required as a part of a new project. So we believe that the code clearly allows for this project to be replaced at the existing 265,000 square foot floor area. We have our consultants here today to answer any other questions relating to the EIR, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Do you want to call up the speakers? And then we'll have 5 minutes of time for each of the speakers.
Yeah, we have 3 speaker cards. The first is Mr. William Ross, followed by Leonor Symes. Thank you, sir. 5 minutes, please.
Spoke too soon.
Oh, sorry, we have 4 speaker cards.
Good evening, Chair Gardius and members of the Commission. I'm a resident of College Terrace. I live about 1,200 feet from the subject site. I believe there's a reason to continue the proceedings tonight, and I'll state that succinctly. First, there's an outstanding public records request. I'll give a copy for the record that was directed to the city, and it concerns the issue of this uncodified practice or uncodified agreement that exists between Stanford University and the city of Palo Alto with respect to allowing leases to be construed separately and apart from the Subdivision Map Act. That was done on November 30th. There should have been a response today. I would respectfully note that there have been 2 prior public records requests, one based upon the same kind of language in the ARB hearing of the reason that this can go forward on a leasehold and is exempt from the MAP Act is an agreement with Stanford University representatives. When it came up before the ARB, I would respectfully point out that Wynn Firth, who just happened to be the city attorney that approved as to form the development agreement for the entire Mayfield project, said that seems unusual. Well, it's still not there, but I would rephrase it this way. I also checked the remarks made by counsel during the proceeding, which are about 2 hours and 38 minutes into the public hearing, where the same terms were used of an uncodified practice and an agreement between high-level officials of Stanford University and the city. Stated differently, the request includes documents which may include agendas for meetings between high-level staff of Stanford University, the city, where the uncodified practice of allowing ground leases to divide property ownership within the research park was discussed and acted upon and confirmed. It's really unfair to the public to say that's what this practice is based on, yet we don't have that document. Recall that goes to the essence of the project description. Is this a single parcel? Remarkably, the one referred to from the FPPC as the one that actually involves the structure, or is it the larger 700-acre or 650-acre research parcel, as has been claimed by the university on several bases? Second, there are changed circumstances under which this project is being carried out. At the very time you were holding the last hearing on this matter, the representative from the university, Wolfman appeared before, the CTRA board and indicated, nothing in writing, that there's a changed project with respect to the Mayfield residential project, which is located between 300 and 500 feet from the subject parcel. This was occasioned by a concentration not anticipated of both TCE and PCB on the project site, which led to a voluntary cleanup agreement, which has a docket number of HSA fiscal year 15-16. If you go look at the site, Amherst Street was to be extended straight through that parcel, and it's now the subject of remedial grading, catch basins, and I would say 3 semi-truck looking things that are actually processing the TCE and PCB for transport. I'd like to put in the record a summary of that, which was taken by Ed Schmidt, who's a resident of College Terrace. But the critical thing is the visual portrayal at the end that's in color that shows its proximity to several residences right on California Avenue. Indeed, the very red trailers that are portrayed there are closer than 100 feet to these residences. It's acknowledged, but not extensively, in the draft EIR, both in section 3.3 and in the cumulative impact portion for hazardous materials, as to the existence of PCB and TCE being cancer causing. I'd like to place in the record one of the state summaries that's been in effect since the late 90s that confirms that's not mentioned. My point is this. The city was also contacted, I believe, yesterday, if I'm correct. I think Fred sent something to you, Jody, saying, what's the deal with this parcel that's immediately adjacent to this? And you went back to a compliance plan that had been filed in September of this year, which is different than this voluntary agreement. Whatever the issue is, these are changed circumstances under which the project is being carried out. If there's going to be a greater concentration of TCE, and PCB, then that needs to be factored into the analysis, both in section 3.3 and the cumulative analysis on sections 4.6 and 4.7 of the EIR, neither of which, curiously, represent this specific property. Why is that of concern to the residents? The applicant for this property is Sand Hill Properties. For mitigation, and there are, I think, 7 hazmat mitigation measures, H1 through H7, they're to be carried out by this developer. The problem is, before the city council right now is a contempt proceeding or an enforcement proceeding showing that they can't comply. I would respectfully suggest that under CEQA guidelines, mitigation is not feasible to be carried out if the applicant itself is incapable of performing it. I think that can be remedied, and I have a suggestion. These are very serious mitigation measures. If the amount of earth that's going to be transported was not hazardous, the cost per cubic yard is about $115. If it's, but it's going to be hazardous. It says that already, and the concentration may be higher. What's needed is a phase 2 analysis on Upper Mayfield to see that there's no migration of this recently discovered hazardous waste into the subject matter. I have just one sentence I'd like to finish with.
I have to cut you off, actually, because I've given you...
Actually, I'd like to assert my right under Public Resources Code Section 21177 and I think there ought to be financial security of either a letter of credit.
Sir, I don't think
or
you're
a
respecting the
performance
decorum
bond.
of this meeting
Thank
right
you.
now. Okay.
Thank you. So the next speaker is Ms. Symes, and followed by David Van Atta. You have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Lenore Symes, and I've lived in Palo Alto for 48 years. So I've been around and watched this town change enormously. I can't speak to the health hazards, but I can speak to what it's like to work with Sand Hill. I live over by Edgewood Plaza, and I've been involved in that project since day one, and well over a decade since this has been going on. I remember very clearly and thought this was weird There were two people who showed up at that very first meeting from either Cupertino or Sunnyvale, and it was a long time ago, who got up to speak at that meeting because they were so frustrated and so upset with how Sandhill did not keep the obligations they made to the community, how they would not talk to them, how difficult they were to work with. And I feel like, oh, it's my turn now. Sandhill was difficult to work with from the beginning. As part of the project at Edgewood Plaza, they got permission to build 10 houses, which all were sold for over $3 million. And in exchange, they got parking and houses. Parking was taken away, I should say. In exchange, Sandhill's agreement was to give that Edgewood Shopping Center a supermarket forever and always, as long as they owned it. Two neighborhoods lost lots of parking, and we don't have a grocery store. And I'm not just going afield to Edgewood, I will bring it back. Fresh Market, who was there, made a business decision to leave the Edgewood Shopping Center, and Sandhill seems to have done nothing to provide a subsidy to some other grocery store to move in, which is usually what's done with a large center to get a key tenant. The fine that they do have right now is absolutely meaningless, and both City Council and Jim Keene are fully aware of the problem. And I just want to add that whatever you decide in working with Sandhill, button down every single loophole you can think of, because they will find a way through them. This is something we have found over the years. And I realize that's not very PC and correct to say in Palo Alto, but that's been our experience. And if you're going to establish a consequence if Sandhill does not live up to a piece of their agreement, please consider to make that consequence of value. From our experience, they have very deep, endless pockets. So they're smart. You know, they didn't get to where they are without being smart. And I'll just ask you to keep some of these factors into consideration, because it's not fun getting up here and saying this. So, and I don't do this lightly, but this has been after 10 years of trying to work with this organization. So I thank you very much, and I wish you all good luck.
Thank you, Ms. Symes.
Yeah.
Next speaker is David Van Atta, followed by Margit Aronpom.
I know who I am. I'm on. Thank you.
Planning Commissioners, thank you for the time. I'm David Van Atta, Hanna and Van Atta, and I'm legal counsel for Sandhill. I'm going to go a little out of order here, and I hope you'll indulge me. The comments that were just made, I think you should take under advisement. Sandhill worked on the Edgewood project. We brought in the grocery store that was required. The grocery store people walked out on their lease. We've been trying ever since to get a new tenant. We have been negotiating and negotiating to get a new tenant. It is our intention to do so. And my understanding is we still have some people who are potentially lined up. This is not something that we did. This is something that happened to us as well. Number two, I've worked with Sandhill on projects in Cupertino and Los Gatos and in San Francisco and a number of other locations. We have honored our words. We have worked very hard. We were undertaking major projects, and I think that it is off point to bring this up in a discussion which is about the validity and of the final EIR that is being presented to you for your determination as to whether it is an adequate EIR. So that is the focus of this meeting, is we are talking about the validity of this EIR. That is what your purview is tonight. I know you just went through a whole discussion about what your purview is on other matters, but your purview tonight is to deal with the adequacy of this EIR. The points that were made about this so-called non-compliance with FAR need to be taken in a context that there is Planning Code Section 1870-100C, which does state that a replacement building can be replaced by another replacement building that has no greater square footage. That's what we're doing. You've heard about some other issues about the Mayfield project. It's not our project. That's the first I've ever heard about this being brought up. That is not our project. All this discussion is not our project. There is sort of an innuendo that we should be looking around for what other people are doing every minute to then bring it up to your attention that some other site may have some other impact on what we're doing. This is not our project. And so I challenge Mr. Ross with respect to his throwing, again, as he seems to be able to do, red herrings into the process. And I think what we need to focus on is our project, the EIR that was extremely well done. We've had draft EIRs, we've had comments to the EIRs. We're now at a stage of you reviewing the EIR and saying, is this an adequate EIR? And I don't hear anything that says our EIR is not adequate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Five minutes.
Hi, Margaret Arambaru. I'm a resident of College Terrace, live on Amherst Street. And I just wanted to briefly address, when you prepare an EIR, you have to start with a project description. And there's still, I believe, confusion about what is the project, what is the parcel upon which all the analysis is based. And I was one of the, along with Doria, we spent a lot of time researching the parcel, the history, the permitting that went on the project, the building that went on this parcel. And it has a long, and then there's a mysterious twist in the middle where the original parcel was developed by Beckman in the 50s, one of the very first developments in the research park, was built on two parcels that were then required to be merged by the city under the subdivision map act. It was done at the City Planning Commission and at the City Council. And then there was another leasehold division which created a residual parcel on California Avenue of a different shape, and the one there's a new permit issued for the building along Page Mill, which is one of the four which is going to be replaced. But in that latter process, there's a mystery. Staff here is not able to determine what exactly happened. But the parcel along California Avenue was given permission to build a second office building, which made it 0.40 in compliance with the FAR and the zoning. But it made the second parcel, the bigger parcel on Page Mill, non-conforming. So you have the opportunity to either continue to allow a non-conforming use. You have the ability, since this building is going to be, all buildings are going to be torn down, to refer to a new development that would be slightly smaller, that would meet the 0.40 FAR. And there's another alternative. Stanford, I believe, still has extra square footage, which they are holding, that's linked to the removal of the 300,000 square feet of buildings on the Mayfield project site, which they're allowed to reallocate to other parcels in the research park. Some has been allocated to VMware up on Foothill. They just recently allocated a portion to their parcel, which they're redeveloping at 1454 Page Mill. And I believe there's still extra square footage, which would kind of meet all the needs. It would allow this project to go forward as designed, and would still allow the city to make it finding that it's consistent with the zoning. So I still wish this question could be more carefully answered. It is mysterious. It now ties into this informal agreement between Stanford and the city that no one's ever seen, that allows the entire 700 acre to be evaluated. But I just want to bring to your attention that these parcels here along College Terrace between California and Page Mill are some of the oldest and smallest parcels in the research park. And if we use the entire 700 acre parcel as the legal parcel, there could be some really a lot of densification on some of the smaller parcels, still allowing for conformance with the FAR in the entire 700 acre parcel. We just think that's it's new. No one's ever seen such an agreement. We'd respectfully like to see something and have some kind of a formal monitoring process, if that's really what's going on with the city. So that's the summary of the comments. One other thing is we do appreciate the agreement that the applicants are proposing to cut off access from their parcel through the parcel on California Avenue and direct all the traffic from their site in and out of Page Mill Road. However, there is no real commitment. There's no formal legal agreement that you can, and I would think that something should be submitted to the city that formally and in perpetuity ensures that egress and ingress is committed to as part of the new development. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all speaker cards.
Okay, at this time I would invite the applicant to, I think it's take 3 minutes for a rebuttal.
Thank you. When we're dealing with this concept of FAR and the size of the Stanford parcel and the size of our ground lease parcel, one thing that has to be kept in mind is the ground leases are created under an exception to the MAP Act that you have much information about in your materials. Subdivision at MAP Act, Government Code Section 66412, parentheses A, parentheses, I'll say that again, 66412.1, parentheses A, parentheses, provides that ground leasing of commercial properties may occur without a subdivision map. That has been provided and followed for decades, not just in Palo Alto, but in other cities. Whatever this concept is, while there was some other agreement about something going on about some of the parcels, is irrelevant, because the fact of the matter is, this is exempt. You don't have to request an exemption. It is exempt under the MAP Act, under that code section. So what that means is, we have two things here. First of all, under the replacement code section about FAR, we're exempt from having to establish new or different FAR because we're replacing like kind, like size buildings with like kind, like size buildings. So the FAR criteria is not applied to what we're doing. If somebody has a rub about how Stanford's doing ground leasing and the like, that's to be dealt with perhaps at some other time. But it doesn't apply to what we're asking for. And number two, how Stanford does their ground leasing over the decades is exempted under the MAP Act, has been exempt under the MAP Act. And I also happen to know, and you've seen from their letters, that Stanford has been working with the city to develop a whole regime and process for dealing with this so that it is a much more clear and, as some people like to say, transparent process going forward. So I hope that we can focus on the idea, our project description is fine. That's what we're looking at as far as dealing with our EIR. And these other ancillary issues may be interesting, but they do not apply to this decision, which is the validity of this final EIR. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'd like to follow the format that we typically follow, which is I'd like to start with commissioners' questions to staff, or even the applicant for that matter, or to anybody in the audience. I did this last time, and I'm going to do it again. I would encourage us to focus on what our purview is tonight. I think there will be a very complex discussion when this goes to City Council and they make the decision on this project with respect to its EIR. Though I would encourage us to use our time efficiently to discuss this topic tonight. Okay, so feel free to kick us off. Whoever would like to start.
I guess I have a question about EV charging stations, actually. So I heard from the applicant today that there's 32 EV charging stations. I think that's higher than what was listed in our materials. But even so, that I understand that's probably that's meeting our legal requirements. But 32 out of 887 is only 3.6%. It's really quite small. And at least from my own personal experience, I'm seeing people fight over these spots. Like, this is becoming more and more of a thing that people are demanding and asking for. So I understand the proposals for 32 now. How difficult is it to add these after the project is completed?
Who are you asking?
Well, the applicant.
It's all based on power.
I'm sorry.
Microphone.
I need you to go to microphone.
I know, the room is leading.
So actually, lead requirement to get us a platinum actually only requires 3% of your parking stalls to be EV charging stations. So that would equate to 27 spots. We've already upped that to 32. There are limitations based on power to the site of how many you can install. We have put, we've gone over and above. We support EV charging stations. My boss drives an EV car, and so we've done everything on the site that we think we can do to push it to the max amount. I don't know, I'm not an electrical expert in terms of how much capacity extra we have or whatever, but it's all relating to power, and it's a careful calculation with how we increase that. So the extra that we've already increased was already taking that power capacity into account.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, I have a question to the leading planner on this project, Jody, because we talked the last time the meeting ended with our very much conversation and then side conversation about the past history and truly the reason behind the floor area ratio that would be supported with the lease line. And I believe you have a presentation, and if you could just share this presentation with us and also with the public. Thank you.
Certainly. As we discussed, tonight's meeting is mostly about the final EIR, but I'm very happy. There certainly are a lot of questions about floor area, and so I did put together some slides related to that. So we have here, this is 1956, and so I'm sorry that I don't have, imagined farms around this, because those other buildings really aren't there. There was really only there might have been 2 buildings in 1956 in this area. So the first building was on the California Avenue side, and so that's what you see here. In 61, then we start building towards Page Mill. 66, we get the middle building here. 72, a little bit more, fills in that entire sort of middle building. And then in 1980 is when this front building on Page Mill Road, gets permits and starts to be constructed. And that's probably one of the most critical factors, is that this front building on Page Mill Road was built prior to 1989, which is sort of the cutoff for when you can do this FAR replacement that everyone's been talking about. And also at this time, the leasehold area was this larger site. So you see kind of the red outline and the blue outline. The lease area at the time was both of those, going from Page Mill Road to California Avenue. And so if you look at that larger site and you look at all the colored buildings there, you come to 39% floor area ratio. So at this point in history, the parcel, was in conformance with our standards.
Was there an FAR in 1980?
Yes.
The applicant said there was
Yes.
not.
There's been 40% for some time, and I can.
The note was there's no FAR prior to April of 1979.
Oh, thank you.
And so, in 1980s, everything is in conformance with the code. It's somewhere in 99, as was stated, commercial lease lines don't have to go through a subdivision process. And so at some point, this new lease line happens. And that's when then we have an application for a new building on the California Avenue side. At that time, as best we can tell, city staff was just looking at the kind of smaller parcel, and all they saw was one, 1956 building, and so it looked like there was more capacity. And so they allowed this 2000 building to happen. So after all of that is constructed, you now have on sort of the California Avenue side, you have 40% FAR, but then because of the new lease line on the Page Mill side, you have 44% FAR, and that's how we come to where we are today.
So 44% those are all, this is only the lot in consideration, or those are both lots?
44% is the red parcel, which is the project site that we're talking about tonight. 44.69%.
Well, before you sort of leave this discussion, how does the 44% represents 276,640 square feet?
Approximately, yes,
Do you
266,000.
by any chance know what the percentage will be once it's replaced with, if it's replaced with this existing, excuse me?
The percentage is exactly the same. They're building back the same FAR. We do have the extra 10,000 of amenity space, but that's not counted towards FAR.
Thanks for clarifying.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Relative to this leasehold split that occurred in 1999, I've heard from some members of the public who believe that some kind of city review was required for that split. And this is a question for you, Cara. Is that, was a city review required, and did that take place?
Thank you, Cara Silver, Senior Assistant City Attorney. So the Subdivision Map Act does exempt subdivisions that occur as a result of commercial lease line adjustments. So a subdivision review was not required. There was a planning review for the 2000 building. It probably had to go through design review. Was it it might have been I'm not sure if it was a minor or major, design review, but it went through a planning review. The map, the parcel or the lease line adjustment was not subject to city review.
Just two follow-up questions. I'll try to be very brief. So if this were requested today, would we require some review? I mean, if this situation that occurred in '99 were to occur today, would we look at the consequence on FAR and then subdivided lot?
Right. So it would still be exempt from a subdivision map. However, because this is located in the research park that's subject to the Mayfield Development Agreement, we now have a process for reviewing lot line adjustments. And so those lot line or leasehold line adjustments. And so we do review them through the Mayfield Development Agreement.
We put a FAR lens on that. We test that for FAR compliance.
Yes, we do.
And I'm sorry, just one final question.
Yeah, but before you do, will you just clarify for the record that as of that agreement, as of
what is the date of the agreement?
We now review those as of.
I believe that the agreement was 2005.
Yes, and then has this situation occurred on any other parcels? I mean, are we setting a development precedent for any place else in the research park?
So, if I may, we actually do have a similar situation, not over the FAR, but it was basically at 3170 Porter. We had two buildings on one leasehold. One building is being taken down and redeveloped, but there also is a new lease line proposed in the middle. And so I happen to be the staff member on that, and so I was very careful about looking at both sides of the new lease line and making sure that they are in compliance with FAR, in compliance with parking, all of those sorts of things.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, so Cara and Jody, or if I may ask you, right, because if you could just help us to understand the issue from the legal and planning perspective. If I just think about this and just help me to formulate my thinking, if it's proper, I believe that there is a conflict between just two clauses. One is that the clause that pretty much is about the grandfathering, that pretty much the applicant has the right to, under section 18.170, to redevelop with the same floor area ratio. or the same square footage pretty much. And the second, but then contradicting argument is pretty much is compliance with the floor area ratio with the lease. Yes, footprint pretty much. So what's the legal guidance on this? Because I think, would you agree that there is a conflict between these two clauses in this situation, or there is some other time-related element that would help us to understand it and resolve it? Just a moment.
Right. Yeah. So under the grandfather provision, if a building is over FAR, whether you look at it by leasehold parcel or by overall legal parcel, the whole 600 acres, under this grandfather provision, if they are over FAR, they are legally able to replace the building. And so that has been a common exemption in our zoning code. And so in one sense, there is a conflict between these two, but it's a standard provision that recognizes that there are certain buildings that can be replaced even though they don't comply with the existing zoning standards.
Okay, so pretty much if we were looking for some legal resolution, that would be pretty much the guidance, right? That regardless of this conflict, the applicant has the right to replace the building under the same square footage.
That's how we've analyzed it.
Okay. Very good, thank you. I think that
public hearing's closed. Yeah, unless you have a specific
No,
question,
I don't.
I'm not comfortable with just letting him chime in.
Okay. No, I don't.
Okay. Are there any questions about the EIR that we would like to dive into at this time?
I would also like to make some comments.
Okay. All right, before you make your comments, before I sort of just throw this into our general discussion, I just want to know if there's any more specific EIR questions so I can create a list of relevant issues for us to discuss. Okay, seeing none, why don't we just begin the discussion on unknown topics. Go ahead.
So I wanna make sure that we reframe this conversation correctly, and I want to make sure that we don't give the people in the audience the idea that we're not taking into account some of their comments. So I do want to address them. So there were comments here about how do we as a city, how do we make sure that developers are actually complying with what they have laid out and what they have set out to do. So I want to make sure to address this because when the city approves a project, they do create a developer agreement. And that developer agreement will have all sorts of requirements in there wherein they actually contract with that entity to do all the things that they promise to do all their mitigations, to do all their cleanup, anything else the city comes up with. So when there are questions about that, about how do we know the developer will fall through, how do we know that these specific things are going to be complied with, right? Whether it was cleanup, whether it was making sure that amenities remain amenities. I think there's one other thing that was brought up. But basically just making sure that things go through as they're supposed to do. That's going to be something that City Council does take up on their own, and it will be part of the agreement. It will be available. Everyone will be able to see it. It will be part of public record. And if there's a question about whether or not if there's enough consequences for doing something or not doing something, if there's a question of building in the right penalties, that's the appropriate time to have that conversation and that discussion. It's not really something we're going to address today, because today we're really just looking at the environmental impacts of the project. Consequences for follow through and all that will be a separate discussion that council ends up having. So just want to make that clear. Yeah, and to the same point, when we're looking at the EIR, the legal question of the lot lines and the FAR and the square footage, it's an important question, but it's not necessarily one that you're going to see us focus on today, because the EIR looked at a square footage that's even bigger than the proposed project. And at the end of the day, you know, when we're looking at the EIR, we're looking to see, did the EIR address all of the environmental impacts that were possible from that project? And because they overshot the square footage even beyond what they're proposing, they've done that in the EIR. Our question is, did they do that sufficiently? Did they do that with enough rigor? Have they actually addressed all of the environmental issues that are going to come with this project? The issue of the FAR, not an environmental issue from our perspective, not for something that we're going to discuss today, but something council will certainly address. If you agree, Commissioner Alchek. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on what we're going to focus on today and what the scope of our conversation is.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I invite commissioners to begin to discuss the issues we are going to focus on tonight. Yeah.
So I think this is a really strong application. I acknowledge I'm the new guy on the block, that you guys are, what, 4 years into it or 5 years, and I'm 30 days perhaps. So I apologize for asking questions that may have been raised a very long time ago. But my main issue with this project is really, that bears on the EIR, is that it's back to the research park purpose, the RP district purpose. And the RP district, and I'm sorry, I'll quote some Unicode. The RP Research Park District provides for a limited group of research and manufacturing uses that may have unusual requirements for space, light, and air. Support office uses should be limited. And yet the entire EIR, the trip impact section of this EIR, is built around a general office use, which I acknowledge is permitted in the use tables, but it's pretty clear that the intent of that permission in the use table is as support space relative to the R&D and manufacturing uses. So I applaud the engineer's honesty in looking at the trip impacts of general office use, because those are higher than the trip impacts of R&D use. But I think we're getting ourselves into, I mean, the reason why we have intersections at D, E, and F levels of service is that we've cumulatively allowed the uses in the research park to switch from the R&D and manufacturing uses to the general office uses, and that's why the number of trips has gone up. And so I really question that whole premise. I just question whether we're analyzing this properly.
Okay. Can I ask you to clarify? Do you mean has this been analyzed properly, or is the fundamental approach to the allowance proper, but the analysis based on that allowance not inconsistent? So the two parts of this, thank you for clarifying, the two parts of this are, is the allowance that we're making correct? I mean, in other words, is this a correct use in the research park district, right? Number one. I actually don't question the technical aspects of the report, based on the premises that it's built around. I have no basis to question that. I do question whether we have the right traffic analysis methodology overall that's capturing cumulative impacts, because the situation on the ground is we've seen intersections reach really low levels of service. And the way we do this is almost guaranteed to not capture the impacts of projects. I mean, a single 500,000 square foot project may get trapped as having a significant impact, but 10 consecutive 50,000 square foot projects wouldn't get trapped necessarily, if they're spaced out over a long enough period of time. And so there just seems to be a problem in how we do this. Well, let me just acknowledge that I think you're not alone in that opinion. I wonder if I know that these standards are sort of set on a state level, and I wonder if staff would like to.
Well, yeah, actually, we. So I'll speak to this, but I'm probably the least educated on the matter. So I'll look to Jody and Cara and Catherine to help me out with this. But as I understand, Palo Alto, we have our SEQA thresholds for significance, and we have, adopted a policy that we rely on the DTA model for what is a significant threshold. We also rely on some of their projections for modeling and so forth. So I think that your question is one that is a conversation this community probably needs to have. Are our CEQA thresholds appropriate for Palo Alto? And there's probably arguments on both sides to have that conversation.
Today's probably not the day to litigate that.
Today's probably not the day. We've got an EIR that is being evaluated consistent with how we've evaluated other projects. I think it would be harmful to impose a new standard to this project when others before it have not been subject to that same
But
standard.
could you comment on the research park?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll let Jody speak
That's
to
appropriate.
the land uses, but I think that your comment is fair, that in terms of the if we're trying to understand, as Commissioner Downey was talking about, the impacts to the environment caused by the project, in many areas this project was evaluated at a higher FAR, at a higher parking ratio, and so we really were not stretching, but we were really kind of testing the boundaries of sort of the worst case scenario that can be envisioned, and the results of that came back with not a significant impact. So as far as land uses in the different districts, I'll turn that over to Jody to speak to R&D versus office.
So I would just agree that research and development is a permitted use in the RP zoning district. Administrative offices, which is more of a headquarters type building, is actually permitted as well. And actually professional office.
Yeah, I'm not contesting that the permitted use table does list all those things, but I'm just pointing out that the purpose section of the code points to a more restrictive definition, and so it appears to me that there's a little bit of a conflict, or conflict may be too strong of a word, but it sounds like the general office, administrative office permitted use is there really to allow the support office use that's alluded to in the purpose section. But
and this is in the zoning code or in the general comp plan?
This is in the zoning code.
Okay, can you bring our attention to that section?
Yes, I can.
So
it's 18. That's the easy part.
You're looking at 18/2010. The purpose of the RP. So the research park provides for a limited group of research and manufacturing uses that may have unusual requirements for space, light, air. Research facilities should be encouraged. Support offices should be limited and should serve the research and manufacturing uses.
That would be the one.
Well, I will point out that even software companies that don't necessarily manufacture a physical good still have research and development teams. They are doing research and development. They're just researching something that's going to be an intangible technology.
And that is true. I mean, the City of Palo Alto's definition of research and development is a little bit different than possibly other cities. And that's another reason, too, while when you look at the traffic report, the ITE standards are more of a state national standard, and so we're having to sort of marry our definition of R&D with national standards of traffic and try and make sure what's the best use. There.
So I've read that section that Jody was just reading and looking at the use sections. I think that there's probably a need for us to, again, not with this particular project, but as this commission knows, we've been looking at the zoning codes, the planning codes, and we're trying to clean up some inconsistencies and references. And I think that's the one that you've identified as a good one for us to take a look at in terms of purposes that set up what is expected on a higher level for a zoning district. But then when you look at the use classification table, which is the part that we go to see what's permitted and not permitted, there is no restriction about limitations, at least in the table.
I thought I heard from the city council to look at the quantitative and the quantitative pieces of the code.
Yeah, let me ask this question. I mean, is there a definition? I mean, we have the
There is a definition of R&D.
Is there a definition for R&D?
There is.
Yeah, and software is included in that definition.
Is not?
Is included.
Okay.
It's not included in general office.
Do you want to speak to that?
But
I mean, so staff has a slightly different take on that. I mean, well, without getting into the different details of the office definition has been interpreted in the past, and I would say for a long-standing perspective, and we can have a conversation about whether that is accurate or not, about permitting such software development companies, say for instance downtown, because those uses tend to be very similar to the types of office uses. There's a cubicle, a computer, there's work being done. It's similar in many regards. Now, we can have a conversation about whether we want to continue to do that, in the future. But at least for past practice, that's how it's been evaluated. So, I agree that maybe there's an opportunity for a conversation about that. Again,
it needs to be fixed.
As far as just to sort of bring the commission back to what we're doing here today is we're looking at the EIR, and the EIR is evaluating the project's impact to the environment.
Right.
Yeah, I'll make another comment on that, which is that, this hearing is really focused on the environment, and I really take to heart the people in the audience who pointed out all the pollutants that had been left in the ground by the research and development that we used to do on actual physical products, right? All the silicon chip manufacturing that we had. And I understand that that's a really serious issue and concern for the community. They definitely don't want those pollutants dredged up again. They don't want them to end up in their water. As far as an EIR is concerned, I would find it very ironic if in the interest of traffic and parking, we were to instead incentivize the same uses that polluted the ground in the first place. Like, as a city, that's a really weird move for us to be making. So I don't know that we want to go in that direction.
Okay. So I'm going to jump in here. This is I think you alluded to potentially discussing these topics at future code cleanup.
Yeah, I mean, I just
meeting, and before you jump in, I do want to invite Ms. Garrett to, because it was brought up now twice, to address for our community what would happen in the event that there were certain just what our process is for dealing with that after the fact, so that people understand how that process works, and I think that will bring some level of assurance.
So Catherine Waugh, Senior Project Manager with DUDEC, and we're the city's environmental consultant for the project. The EIR found actually that it's known that there are PCBs in the soil in a small portion of the site. There's already a soil management plan that's been approved by the Regional Water Quality Board for how to clean that up. So it's just, it can't be done until the buildings are demolished. So that's already in place, and then the other, the TCE is a concern that's from the groundwater plume. Excuse me. And the excavation on the site is not expected to reach the groundwater level, but should it reach the groundwater level, there are specific provisions in the mitigation measures explaining that dewatering could be done and how that would be accomplished, and then construction standards to make sure that if that TC is is in contact with the building, that there are waterproofing and air ventilation requirements to make sure that those concentrations don't build up.
And would you mind just touching base on how this project what would happen if, for example, the mediation obligations weren't met, or if, for example, the standard that was set wasn't met, and how the project would potentially be affected by that? What the oversight would be in all these scenarios?
Well, the I'm not as familiar with the city's specific provisions for how to ensure compliance, but there is a mitigation monitoring and reporting program that defines that certain milestones need to be met before the project can proceed. So the remediation of the PCB area would have to be demonstrated through soil testing, and analysis, and those results would be submitted to the city before further building could occur. So that would, demolition would have to happen first, soil cleanup would occur, and then before building permits could be issued, the city staff would have to verify that those contaminant levels had been, or that contaminated soil had been disposed of properly.
Okay.
Through the chair, I would just add that the mechanism that the city has for enforcement is called a stop work order, and we have issued these in connection with other projects where the mitigation measures have not been adhered to. The building official goes to the property and posts a stop work order, and all work must stop.
Okay. So before we move on, are you comfortable with moving on?
Yeah, I don't feel like these. I honestly don't feel like the research, like the zone or the district issue is resolved, but I'm not sure what I can do to push that forward.
I guess let me ask you the question differently. Would that issue prevent you from supporting the findings?
Yeah, because the EIR is based on a use that I believe is in conflict with the district definition.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I have questions about parking and also TDM, right? And there is a paragraph in the handout about comprehensive TDM plan, which is pretty much extra that's offered by the applicant. But regardless, can we learn more about this? The reason is like this, that although the applicant seeks no reduction in parking, we know from the past hearings that Page Mill Road is pretty much clogged and there's a problem. So we will take any TDM plan and any further understanding, any further effort to reduce congestion on this road. Thank you.
So just to be clear, is that a question for the applicant or is that a question
to the applicant? Yes.
Okay, so are you going to open a public hearing?
No, it's. I mean, does staff have an answer on this?
Well, so I mean, as far as I don't know what the exact TDM plan is that's being proposed. Is there ultimately going to be a condition for one? We're not. Okay, so so what we're looking at as far as impacts under the environmental impact, the EIR, was do the trips that are anticipated to be generated for this project, do they trigger an impact? And as I understand it, even without a TDM, there are no impacts that cannot be mitigated as a result of the project. So
yes, and I understand this completely. I understand the extra proposal from the applicant that's in writing, right?
Okay. So I guess then to develop that further, I'm just trying to understand how an answer to that helps inform your evaluation of the EIR.
No, I mean it's not gonna, because this is extra, right? So this is nothing that would invalidate my opinion and my vote about this. But I would like to I'm seeking clarifications, because the Page Mill is the critical artery to reach Palo Alto, when we had the problems, many hearings about this in the past, right? So
sure.
If there is any proposal from the applicant to do voluntary TDM, I would like to just have more understanding about how this could reduce the traffic on Page Mill Road.
Okay, and so any voluntary TDM would be a part of the discretionary entitlement, which is the ARB approval, which ultimately is going to be reviewed by the Architecture Review Board. It's up to the commission and the chair to continue to explore the matter, and if you do want to receive a response, then you would open up the public hearing to receive that comment.
I just want to have a clarification. It's not about.
Are there guidelines for opening the public hearing?
You open up the public hearing.
For one comment?
You can open and close it.
Okay, I will open the public hearing to respond to that question.
Thank you.
Can the applicant please respond to that question? You have 3 minutes.
So again, to reiterate, our project doesn't have any impacts that cannot be mitigated, so there's no significant traffic impact. But we are responsible applicants, and we understand the importance of TDM for our project and in general. And so we have an entire TDM proposal that we are fine with as being part of our project conditions of approval. Within that proposal lays out TDM specialist, who was here for the project earlier, is also our TDM advisor and consultant on this project. So they've put together a project that, and they work on large projects, VMware projects, et cetera. So they've put together a very comprehensive plan. In addition to that, our within our own leases that we sign with tenants, we understand that, you know, the goal of the city and the goal of the park is to reduce single occupancy vehicles. We support that completely, and we will do everything we can. So within our leases that we work with tenants on, we also have provisions in those leases that mandate that tenants participate in this TDM measures. So the tenant that we have signed up for the future project and that's already actually occupying, or actually there, so they're going to be the future occupants on the project, they actually provide Caltrain passes to all their employees. They also have programs where they allow their employees to put together pre-tax dollars and, you know, put that aside out of their paycheck towards transportation. So those two, we believe, are the most important TDM measures that tenants can do, and our tenants that will be the future occupants of this project have already done that and are doing that. So,
is there anything specific to page mill traffic? Because those that you mentioned are related to access from the Caltrain station, right? About the Caltrain passes. Is there, and I understand that you said that you talk about the single occupancy vehicles, but is there anything extra about reducing the traffic in this TDM program?
So page mill specific, I can't speak to in detail because there's a lot of shuttles that exist that service that project. I believe there's 4 shuttle lines that tenants and employees of our project can use along Page Mill. So we have programs that educate, encourage, and encourage people to use those lines. So part of TDM is having a TDM manager in place that continues to educate employees of all the resources that are available. So there's actually a lot of things that are actually available on Page Mill Road, and I think that's part of our program. But single occupancy traffic is kind of the big issue that we are addressing.
Okay, last question to the applicant since she's the microphone. So, does your program have any specific metrics that would be where your tenants would be signing up to? That this program can be evaluated against?
Performance criteria.
I'm sorry?
Performance criteria.
So again, this is a voluntary TDM program. We are putting this out there even though we don't have any impact. We, I think, encouraging and offering these resources, especially the ones that are the high ticket items like Caltrain passes and subsidized or pre-tax money that are subsidized by the company, I think those are the biggest things that we can control. It would be very difficult for us to mandate tenants to, have specific criteria, and what would we do? Kick them out? If it's a bit hard as a landlord. We've already put into lease provisions what we think will encourage this type of usage. So I think as a landlord, we've done everything that we could possibly do to kind of encourage the highest use and reduce SOVs in the area.
Okay, so I understand this is a voluntary program, but I didn't hear any consent about some performance criteria, right? So what I would like to, although we have no binding possibility on this element, but I would like to encourage you to pretty much to propose some sort of measures that would be tangible when you sign the leases, and this is I believe that in terms of the environmental protection, and then ISO 14000, which I believe you and all your tenants should comply with. Then pretty much there is a increasing or progressive reduction in the environment, and I think that you can request adhering to some sort of standards with some contract or with some other guidance that your that your tenants would be contracting with.
We'll definitely look into that and take that into
Thank you.
consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Did staff have a comment? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to close the public hearing at this time. All right, I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts. I'm satisfied with the findings of the EIR, and I'm prepared to support a motion recommending that the City Council certify this FEIR for the proposed project at 1058. Before I open it up to my fellow commissioners for a motion, I want to make a few comments. I think I'll respond to just general comments. I think with respect to the EV charging stations, a comment that you made earlier, I think the market will drive that change. I think what will probably happen in this area is that maybe tenants will of commercial buildings or commercial landowners will see that is a product in high demand, and there might be a market-based approach that will sort of satisfy your and I think not incorrectly, desire to see more of that. I want LEED is like a national standard, and I would suggest that the local standard for electric vehicles is probably much higher. But I also want to sort of address the comment that Commissioner Walfogel made about the makeup of the uses. It struck me that it's possible that suggests that provision of the code applies in all likelihood to not just a specific parcel, but the entire research park as a whole. And I wonder to what extent that the balance or the support office space would have to be evaluated in that regard. And so, again, that's an interesting question because we're evaluating this project on a leasehold specific basis, but that code provision that you were referring to, I think, sort of applies to the entire research park. And if 75% of the research park was R&D, and 100% of 30% of the leaseholds were office, would that still satisfy the criteria? So the reason I mention that is because I think there's a lot of complexity in your concern, and I'm not sure. What I would like to see is you, and I think you've done it, articulate the concern in a way that City Council can sort of understand your thoughts. Hold on, not yet. And I think you've done it. But I also think if a motion follows and you decide not to support it, I think it would be good after the fact to maybe, because the council has asked for it, for you to be specific about the reason at that time, if that's okay. And then the last couple comments I want to make is, I don't know Sandhill Properties from Adam as a commercial landlord in our community, but I am familiar with our process for enforcing our mitigation measures, and I'm also familiar with the situation at Edgewood, and I think that I did not find the statements today from the member of our community that suggested that Sandhill was in some way not to be trusted because of their record at Edgewood as persuasive, principally because I think that represented a lack of understanding of what it means to be a commercial landlord. Particularly with respect to retail, and this is where I think it helps to have experience in the real estate and land use markets, which is that I'm very familiar with retail and commercial markets and this specific issue of vacancy with respect to failure to be able to provide, let's say, a grocer. I want us to approach our analysis from the perspective that our city's enforcement policy with respect to these mitigation efforts is different, very, very different from the way our city enforces what many would refer to as a broken PC zone process. It's dramatically different. And even despite that difference, I don't necessarily believe that the failure for what's going on in Edgewood I don't even want to deal with whether or not it's accurate to suggest that somebody's at fault or is intentionally failing in some regard. But I do want to suggest that these mitigation efforts are going to be overseen in a dramatically different way than our PC zone requirements have been enforced in the past. And I can say that with confidence because our PC zone our public benefit requirements do not have a good track record in specific cases for enforcement, and we've heard that many times as a commission. But we have, during my tenure, I have yet to hear of an issue where our city has failed to oversee a mitigation effort, and that has resulted in some, terrible result. Okay, so that's the last statement I'm going to make. And then at this time, what I'd like to do is open it up and see if anybody would like to make a motion.
Yep, I'd like to make a motion. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the EIR presented to us today and move it along to council.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think that all members of the commission have said that the EIR is in fact pretty thorough. It does a very good job of looking at the different impacts in the project and addresses those concerns pretty thoroughly. So I'm happy with the EIR. I do believe that there are other issues that have been raised and are great issues for discussion and for council to address. But I don't think that they prevent me from finding this to be a good EIR and one that we can approve and move forward.
Okay, would you like to say anything?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. I'd like to thank the staff for addressing the issues that were not clear to us and to the public before we started the first hearing on this. And when I was asking about these additional documents, it was primarily and also additionally from the concern perspective that we need to disclose to the public all the facts, and then allow the public just to look at the facts. And for this reason, thank you very much for just doing this study, because it brought further clarity, and I hope that, I'm sure that it will be useful for further presentation to the staff. So thank you, staff, for addressing this, resolving, and then it allowed us to pretty much to finalize our perspective from the legal matters and planning. So thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna call this motion to a vote.
Do I get to say anything about why I may not support it?
I'm going to give you an opportunity to say why you did not support it if you decide not to support it.
You can do it after the vote.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you. I can't say anything now to.
Well,
you can speak to the motion.
Yeah, if you'd like to speak to the motion, yeah, please. If you'd like to speak to the motion, please do.
Okay, thank you. This is a really tough one for me. It's my first vote on a project like this. I think it's a thoughtful project. It's a pretty good project. I would actually support it with some performance criteria on TDM. I'll point to Table 4 on the page 22 of the Hexagon report. I think the reason why we don't see trip impacts is that Table 4 predicates the use on office space rather than on R&D. And if we were starting with a baseline that reflected the RP district, we probably would see a significant impact, but anyhow, I don't think that there was enough data to do that. So anyhow, that's my my criticism of this EIR, at a very specific level, is that I don't think it properly captures the trip impacts because it's not looking at the RP district purpose. It's not looking at the historic use, and therefore it's showing a smaller trip impact than we'll actually see from the historic use to today. So that's the basis of my.
Okay. All right. Great. At this time, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Let the record reflect we have 3 in favor and 1 opposed. Would you like to elaborate on why you opposed the motion?
Nothing further. So.
Okay. I'd like to close this item, and we can move on to the remainder of the items on our agenda. We have minutes to approve? Oh, we did it already. You're right. Sorry. Okay. Allow me just for the record to apologize to our esteemed Robin Elner for not having named every speaker on our commission. She'll probably have a difficult time figuring out the minutes for this meeting. I guess you can look forward to the fact that I won't be doing this very often. And with that, I adjourn this meeting.
9:30. Did you give it to Robin?